All right. Welcome, everybody. This is what, episode 8 of Into the Minefield. Good to be back. Um, yeah, I'm going to be talking about two sort of, I guess, crime films is how I describe them. I didn't actually write a description for this yet on YouTube, but in the Instagram post. But I think some of the themes are there's the two films are kind of different in a lot of ways, but I think there are some sort of overlapping themes that are kind of interesting. So anyway, yeah, tonight we're going to be talking about Green Street Hooligans and Hell or High Water. So these are we kind of talked about this live on the Palantir stream. So that was like 3 streams ago. If any of y'all want to go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But yes, I'm joined once again by Hesher, who was on here with Daniel. Shout out to Daniel for the Palantir stream. And so good to have you back. Yeah, good to be doing this. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too, man. It was funny, we talked like a week and a half ago about setting it up, and it was like, oh yeah, it'll give us plenty of time to watch these films. And I just found out before we went live that I wasn't the only one cramming them in right before we went live here, so I feel pretty good about it. But yeah, I'm glad to be here talking about them both. And I mentioned them both in the same breath on that Palantir stream because there was something in the back of my head, like there's something related about these two movies other than that, they're sort of like crime related. And I still haven't figured it out. I don't know if I made that up. Like I think what I was thinking was that both were written by Taylor Sheridan, which Hell or High Water is. But I'm not sure if there is actually a connection, if Taylor Sheridan had anything to do with Green Street Hooligans, or if I just brain farted and that's how we ended up with these two films. So maybe you or somebody else can enlighten me as we go through the process here tonight.
Yeah, I think I was under the impression they were directed by the same person. And I think that's what I was thinking. They were directed by the same person. And then I looked it up. Actually didn't look it up until I think yesterday. And I was like, oh, these movies were not directed by the same person. So yeah, I don't exactly know where that came from. But it'll be. I think it works. The two of them. So
Yeah, they actually do. They went together decently, although in my opinion, one was way better than the other. But we'll get to that.
yeah, well, let's go ahead and get into that because I always like to start any of these movie streams off with if I'm either if I'm doing them solo with kind of my own general thoughts about the films and if I have a guest obviously. So kind of what's your sort of overall take of the two films?
Well, I thought Green Street Hooligan. I was telling you before the stream, like I'm a person. I'm from California. I grew up in like skateboarder and metalhead and sort of mountain person cultures in California. So like understanding British accents and British comedy, it just didn't. I don't know. It was sort of a square peg in a round hole for me growing up. But as I got a little bit older, I watched all the Monty Python films, and obviously there's a lot of great work with British actors and European actors. So, I've gotten better at it, but I still kind of hit that block. Like when I first started and I was like, oh, the accents are thick. Oh, it's about, football, soccer, which, I really don't, I'm not a big, I'm not a big sports person for any sport. But once I got into it, I turned the subtitles on to make sure I wasn't missing too much. And, it became an interesting film, but the overall quality of Hell or High Water to me just stands out a lot more. It's got really well-known, really good actors. It had Nick Cave doing the soundtrack, and the writing. Taylor Sheridan's script was so freaking good for that like he didn't even hardly have to shop it around. A friend of ours, shout out to our friend Jeremy Lawson. He's an actor, and he's the one that turned me on to that film and told me it was, top notch. So that was how we ended up watching it. Spore and I ended up watching it. It was just like, how have we, this movie's like 9 years old. How have we not seen this? It's amazing. So it's just like and it's set in Texas, and it's about like Robin Hood style bank robbers, and all these things are near and dear to my heart. So for me, like I really enjoyed Hell or High Water. Give it A+, you know, five Rotten Tomatoes, whatever. And Green Street Hooligans, I kind of felt was like, oh, this is like the soccer club version of Fight Club.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't made the Fight Club connection, but that I can definitely see that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? It's like in Fight Club, you've got um, male angst driven by nihilistic machismo, pretty much, and a sort of attractive, like also Robin Hood style thing to it, because you know ultimately what they were doing in Fight Club was destroying all the banknotes.
Hmm.
And again, the Hell or High Water kind of goes into, you know, how to get around predatory liens and that kind of thing. So, you know, there's a lot of similarities there. And when you look at Hell or High Water in particular, to me, it's a film about disenfranchised people. And it's interesting to have a setup built around disenfranchised people when you've got, um, you know, certain characters like the Indian, the American Indian that was the partner of I hate to do this, but I'm going to call him Big Lebowski, Jeff Bridges' character, you know, and it was like I don't want to go too deep into it. Let's just kind of brush on it because we'll probably get there a little bit more. But there's this whole sort of juxtaposition between what happened to Native Americans at a certain point in time and what happened to, you know, like West Texas Americans at a certain point in time, where their quality of life, their ability to own land, their ability to thrive and make a life for themselves and their families is just not there anymore. It's a harsh reality that so many people have experienced. So to me, it was really interesting to kind of, you know, see that and look at the various pieces in the timeline of America that are referenced in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was, and there's that. Well, I guess we get the monologue that Jeff Bridges' character, his partner, has kind of observing. Yeah, like what you were saying of his ancestors had this land, and then it got taken, and uh, that and then it was like taken by the grandparents of people who were in this town now. Like they're sitting in this town where he says there's like there's what a hardware store where everything is twice as expensive as Home Depot, and one restaurant with a waitress that's a rattlesnake because she was like the really mean waitress, had been working there for like I don't know 40 years or whatever, and then and he was like, yeah, and now he said something like, now it all belongs to them, and like points at the bank across the street. And so I thought those are really, and it's interesting because sometimes those sentiments, and I guess we'll just go ahead and get into Hell or High Water first, if you're good with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll do it kind of. We do these sort of non-linear, so we may refer to the plot some, but I think the themes are a lot more interesting than a sort of play-by-play of the plot. Yeah. But I notice sometimes sentiments like these. Like I know there was talk, like people didn't like there was sort of anti-oil company sentiment that was, and the brother. I can't remember the characters' names, but like the brother who was the more sort of reckless, crazy one. I think it was the one who was not Chris Pine. I can't remember the actor's name, but he said at one point he was like, the oil companies aren't friends of anybody except us, right? Because they're trying to. I guess it might be good to get into the plot for people, which there will be spoilers, obviously, but anyway, what I'm getting at with this is that sometimes people say like, oh, these ideas where people talk about, oh, predatory practices from financial institutions, or bad treaties that the U.S. made with the native tribes and things like this. It's like, well, no, this is if you, because people say, oh, it comes off as preachy or propaganda or something, but it's like, no, if you actually go talk to, I don't want to say real people, but just like normal, everyday kind of people. I've had conversations with people who are, Native Americans who have basically said this, like very similar kind of things, that they feel like, their people got a pretty raw deal from the US, and they're 100% correct about that. And, the same thing with people feel like, there's these predatory practices from certain financial institutions, and yeah, like the predatory liens and things like, and reverse mortgages and these kinds of things. And, corporations kind of screwing people over, and anyway, so it's yeah, I mean, those are real feelings that a lot of people have. And if you talk to people who are just sort of like normal everyday working, people, I guess you could say, on the lower on the socioeconomic ladder, I mean, that's real things people say. I've heard people say basically the exact same kind of things in
Yeah,
conversations.
and you'll hear a lot of that milieu in some of the ancillary characters in Hell or High Water. So that actor you're thinking of is Ben Foster, that plays Chris Pine's character's older brother, I believe. And he's basically 1 year out of jail, right? Just to sort of set the back tone for this, because this is a story about two brothers. And one is an ex-con with a really short temper, and one is very calculated. He's like a divorced guy who's been unable to, keep up with child support and all that. Their mother just died. And they plan a series of bank robberies to avoid foreclosure on their family ranch. And Chris Pine's character is sort of like the mastermind behind it. He asks his older brother, the ex-con, to help him. And the older brother's just like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And he's like, no one ever like gets away with this. And he's like, well, why are you doing it? And it's like, because you asked me to. So there's sort of the like outlaw mentality and, family blood being thicker than water, all that kind of thing going on. But like as they go along, if for example there's a scene where Ben Foster's character robs a bank outside of a diner that they're eating in that was, unplanned, and while Chris Pine's still in there paying the bill and kind of flirting with the rotund waitress with the pretty face. And the cops come in to talk to her, and she refuses to give them any information on it. You know what I mean? She's like, yeah, they gave me $200. I got a big tip. And she had nothing. She didn't want to give them away. And it was like, there's four cowboys, destitute cowboys sitting over there at a table. And Jeff Bridges' character is he's the Texas Ranger, which are employed by Texas DPS here, and which is Department of Public Safety. And he asks the good old boys, how long you been here? And one of them goes, long enough to see them boys over there rob that bank that's been robbing me for 30 years. So there's like and there's another scene where he runs across some cowboys that are having to move cattle away from a field that's burning. And they're just like, he's like, I wish I could do something to help, and they're like, oh, you could put me out of my misery. It's no wonder my kids don't want to do this job. There's a lot of like one-liners and short interactions that really lay the cultural context out of West Texas in gas drilling towns that have basically turned into ghost towns, and where banks are using reverse mortgage predatory loans against vulnerable people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought the comment from the cowboys taking the cows across the road was particularly insightful. And it's interesting because there have been people who have kind of wanted to get into ranching. You see some of this on like social media of people, millennials and Gen Z, who have sort of, want to go to that. And there's a lot of people out there who seem genuinely into it and genuinely like it. But I mean, yeah, like it's at a very hard existence. It's, long days, you make very little money. And yeah, I mean, I heard a rancher say one time that he said, you know how you become a millionaire as a rancher? You start as a billionaire.
Yeah.
It's not like a big money making kind of endeavor, which I haven't really watched Yellowstone. I think I watched half an episode, and I know there's a lot of people like, I'm not bashing the show, but when you have this family that's out there with like private helicopters and living in luxury, it's like, nah, that's there's nobody that in ranching that lives like that. But I did want to ask, because I've never been to Texas, and this movie almost seemed kind of, I don't know, it's like it's because when you think about the interactions with the locals and things like that, I mean, is that how things really are? Because it almost seemed like it was playing to stereotypes, not in the way that was like a mockery or exploitative or anything, but it just seemed like stereotypical of what you think of with tech. Do you think that's accurate, their portrayal of Texas, or was it kind of played up for the film?
I think it's probably pretty accurate, actually. It's not all of Texas. We live in Central Texas, and I'm trying to find a way to say this other than it's fairly normal here. But I guess that makes sense. It's fairly normal here, but there are towns like that. Like Midland, Texas, is one of the focus towns in the film. It's not far from Lubbock. It's in West Texas, I believe, and like Northwest Texas, not far from Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is featured in the film too, because they go over the state line at one point to kind of set up, uh, part of their plan, which was going to a casino, winning a little bit of money, and putting it in a trust basically, and paying off the lien on what was their family farm. Um, but we've driven through a lot of Texas. We drove all the way from California to Texas, which means we came through near El Paso, and it takes about 2 days to drive from El Paso to Central Texas. The state is huge, and we passed a lot of towns that looked a lot like that film. And we stayed in one town. I guess they deserve a shout out. We stayed in Fort Stockton one night, and it was very much like that. That was very accurate. Like, not quite as crusty as the scene in the diner when it's like, "What don't you want?" There's this one scene where the waitress comes up to Jeff Bridges' character and, "What don't you want?" And he was like, and she was like, "We serve T-bone steaks, and we got baked potatoes and green beans. So what don't you want with your T-bone steak?" And we've been in some places that are kind of like that, not quite to that degree, but we've definitely seen it. And there's even places here in Central Texas where you'll be in a town, and then you'll go like down they call them farm to market roads. You go down a FM road, and you'll see like a bunch of really nice ranches, like successful ranches, people that maybe were billionaires when they started, or maybe their parents paid it off in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, or something like that. And they look beautiful. But then like the next property over is a decrepit single wide, with a bunch of cars in the front of the driveway and on the property, and overgrown tractors, overgrown with weeds and stuff like that. So I thought they filmed it on site, I believe, on location, and I thought it was pretty accurate, to be quite honest, even though I don't really live in that reality in Texas.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's yeah, I know Texas is a I didn't know exactly where you were in the state, but I know it's a huge state. I know one of my sisters went out there, and she said that like where we live, it's like if you drive an hour, you've gone through probably 3 or 4 towns. She was like, in Texas, if you drive an hour, you're just an hour away from where you were before. And so I was like, yeah, that would seem I was like, that's a totally different kind of geography than I'm used to.
Oh, I'm still getting used to it, man. I'm used to a state that has, an ocean, a beach, rolling hills, a desert, ski slopes, basically everything, rivers. And here in Texas, it's just like a lot of weeds, a lot of flat highways, 5 hours to the beach, and not like a California beach.
Yeah, I've never been. I guess I've never been to Texas, but I've heard I know there's one a lot of people go to for spring break. I think it's like
South Padre
South
Island.
Padre. Yeah, that
Yeah, it's
was
very
the
popular.
the big one. But yeah, so I'm going to just pull up the plot here because I was glad you got into that. As soon as we started talking, I was like, oh gosh, this is not going to make any sense if we don't at least kind of lay it out. But there was so speaking of the interactions with some of the sort of supporting characters, there was a really good interaction where they go to the casino. So you said they get the chips and they go gamble a little bit and then they go cash them out and they basically may lose a few $100s or something at worst. But there was that great scene where Ben Foster's character is talking to, he kind of gets into a little bit verbal back and forth with a Native American guy at the, I don't know, blackjack or poker, whatever they're playing. And he said, so he asked him, he said, oh, you Comanche? And he said, yeah. And he's like, do you know what Comanche means? And the guy tells him like, oh, I think it means like at war with everybody or something like, or against everybody. I can't remember exactly.
Everybody's enemy.
Everybody's enemy. That's right. And so then the Ben Foster character is like, well, then I'm Comanche. And they kind of have, there's sort of this sort of tension is resolved there, and they have this kind of understanding of, like, this guy is a loose cannon, But I mean, I think it's interesting because the Chris Pine character, even though he's more kind of balanced and even, he does still show that he has a certain unpredictability and propensity and capability of violence. Because there's that scene where they stop at the gas station, and the Ben Foster's character is just sort of like leaned back in his seat, and these guys pull up in like a, I don't know, Charger or something, and they start.
You mean douchebags? They look like douchebags.
Yes, douchebags. Yes, exactly. And like this awful like green color Charger, and so they kind of start mouthing off at the Ben Foster character, and Chris Pine comes out and just like pummels the guy who's in the driver. I mean, pretty brutally.
A better fight than any fight scenes in the other movie we're going to talk about too. Probably the only, as far as I can remember, the only physical altercation in the movie, and it's filmed in such a way, it's like watching Pulp Fiction, you know what I mean? Where when a scene of violence happens, it's visceral. You cannot tell. There's no pulled punches. You watch Green Street Hooligans, by the way, I just found out there's 2 Green Street Hooligans. We may have watched the wrong one. I think that the one that was recommended to me was 2005 Green Street Hooligans with Elijah Wood and Charlie Hunnam and a bunch of other big names. So I don't know how we both ended up on the British version of this, but it looks like it has. There's the tagline: a wrongfully expelled Harvard undergrad moves to London, where he is introduced to a violent underground of football hooliganism. So I don't know, man. We may be in a bit of a thing there. What was I talking about though? I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, in Green Street Hooligans, if you watch the fight scenes, there's a number of like slow-mo shots where you'll see someone pull a punch or ghost a punch around someone's face. And that scene at the gas station in Hell or High Water is just like a prison beatdown or something like that. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really liked about it is how realistic it came off, and it reminded me of the violence, sort of the hand-to-hand violence in Sicario, which I couldn't remember. I remembered now it was Denis Villeneuve that directed that, but Taylor Sheridan wrote it, so I don't know how much input he had. But whenever you see like some sort, and there's I mean, the thing with Sicario is there's not that much actual like physical kind of hand-to-hand violence in it, and yeah, I mean, I think that was and like you said, in Hell or High Water, that was the only scene of that, but it feels very it feels very real. Like it's not sort of showy. I mean, it's very, one of the things I think is really good. And I talked about this in both the True Detective and Sicario streams, is the violence is very efficient, is that it's brutal. But it's like Chris Pine wastes no time. It's like he's trying to inflict the maximum amount of damage in the shortest amount of time possible. And I think that works really well, and that's, it's not like, it's not uncontrolled and sort of frantic. It's direct. He's basically sending a message, because then he goes over to the other side of the car, and the guy's like, oh, you had it coming, like the other passenger, because he sees, like, he doesn't want to get his face smashed into the top of the car door either. So
Yeah, definitely. And there was that moment there too where because the guy, he really did deserve it. He was the one that started talking shit, and he was the one that pulled a gun out.
mhm.
And there was a scene earlier in the movie where they robbed this podunk bank, and there's an old timer in there, right? Remember that one? And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're robbing the bank, and the little brother's taking the money, and he's like, you got a gun on you, old timer? And the guy's like, hell yeah, I got a gun on me. And Chris Pine comes and like takes the gun out of his waistband and stupidly sets it on the counter right in front of the guy. And of course they end up taking fire when they're making their escape from that place. And his little brother's like, you trying to get us killed? You left it on the counter? So after he beat the guy at the gas station, he took his gun and he threw it 30 yards across the gas station parking lot or something like that. So I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. I mean, there is other violence in the movie, but it doesn't really come until the end, and it's all long distance gun violence for the most part, with a couple car explosions probably.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize that's what he threw, because I saw him throw something, but I didn't. I guess I didn't realize that it was
Yeah,
the guy. So yeah, that's, you don't really see people kind of learning. It's a very subtle detail of him, of him learning. And yeah, I mean, he doesn't. And the violence with him is, it also seems very kind of appropriate to the situation, because the first bank robbery they do, where the manager or whatever comes in, and the Ben Foster character, pistol whips him. And then later, Chris Pine is like, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to punch the guy. Like, that was totally uncalled for.
Yeah, the difference between the two brothers is a very interesting factor. I think the relationship between Chris Pine and Ben Foster's character, and the relationship between Jeff Bridges, and I'm gonna have to find the other guy's name because I'm gonna refer to him a lot, but the American Indian Texas Ranger, were very, very interesting. And Taylor Sheridan did an amazing job with the dialogue between those two characters, those four characters, those two pairs. And my friend I was referencing earlier told us that script sold like very easily, like that he
Mhm.
had no problem selling that script because it was so good.
Which, yeah, that's not surprising at all, that how fast that was. And that I just, I had the Wikipedia article pulled up, and I missed this earlier, and there's no citation on this, so I'm guessing this is true. I know it's Wikipedia, but it said that Hell or High Water is the second installment of Taylor Sheridan's American Frontier trilogy, along with Sicario and Wind River. And I think that's interesting, also because the movies came out. Sicario was 2015, Hell or High Water was 2016, Wind River was 2017. But yeah, I mean, the guy's just kind of been, and didn't he also do, yeah, I think he does Yellowstone, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, is he involved in that? Okay, yeah,
I
I'm
believe
not.
he's involved in Yellowstone somehow. Uh, let's see.
He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for Hell or High Water, if that means anything to anyone.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big deal.
It was also nominated for 3 other Oscars, including Best Picture. And Wind River, I have not seen yet. I'm gonna have to watch that one next. They call it a neo-Western crime film.
Yeah, that one is that's a really good one. I think that was the first Taylor Sheridan, and, or I guess Sons of Anarchy was the first thing I saw him involved in.
Oh,
But
check
the
this
first,
out. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I
no, no,
didn't
go
know
ahead.
this. Taylor Sheridan got his start portraying Danny Boyd in Veronica Mars. Did you used to watch that? It was like 2005, I think.
No, I've been wanting to go back and watch that. I didn't watch it when it aired, though.
Interesting. Yeah, and he was in Sons of Anarchy too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but Wind River's definitely definitely worth watching. I mean, it's set in a totally different location, but there's some similar themes in that one. So you can definitely kind of see that some of the themes across Taylor Sheridan's work. And I mean, I think all three films are brilliant. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal writer.
Yeah, I've watched Sicario like 3 times since I got into this, and I'm kind of excited that there's one in this trilogy that I haven't seen. Turns out he's also involved with Tulsa King uh, and Lioness and Landman, all of which I see in my streaming tiles all the time, and none of which I've watched yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those either. I don't think I've ever heard of one of them. I think Landman I'd heard of, but
It's probably Landman. I don't know, but
Landman, that might be
it's
it.
all crammed together in one word.
Huh, interesting.
He's also this is interesting. I don't know much about his history or why, but it says here in 2021 Taylor Sheridan was inducted into the Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame, and in 2024 he was inducted into the Texas Business Hall of Fame and is also an honorary graduate at the Texas Christian University. So he clearly has a Texan pedigree. Texas approves of Taylor Sheridan. He's from North Carolina, though, oddly enough.
Oh, so yeah, he wasn't. Oh, it looks like okay. So he looks like he's from North Carolina. He grew up in Texas.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought he was from Texas originally. I didn't realize he was.
I did too. It looks like he moved to Fort Worth when he was young.
Okay.
And his mother's originally from Waco, so that counts. He's an original Texan.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. So he's an actual Texan. I don't know. It's
Unlike me.
It's funny. It's just funny. I mean, I think about people like there's a thing. I was thinking that King of the Hill episode where the guy from Massachusetts comes to Arlen, and he's they're trying to get the propane contract for him, and he's he's got like the heavy Boston accent. He's like, I'm gonna put on boots and spurs and like a cowboy hat and all of this. It's just it's funny when because I've heard of people doing that. I'm sure that's a real thing. Like somebody will move to Texas from I don't know, from like wherever, and then they start wearing a cowboy hat. Like they've never been on a horse a day in their life.
Yep.
So it's interesting because it makes sense because it said that him growing up on a ranch. So I was like, because there's got to be something there to where like he actually like has, because I think the way he writes this stuff is it seems genuine. It seems authentic. It's not like this is some guy that grew up in the East Village and lived there until he was like, I don't know, 40 or whatever, then decided he was going to be a cowboy or something. It's like, no, it seems like he really knows it.
Yeah, definitely. I can see why. He's definitely got the pedigree for it. And geez, the amount of like nominations and stuff. Jeff Bridges even got a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Best film editing. It's pretty highly acclaimed, and I had never heard of it before my friend Jeremy told us about it.
Yeah, I'd heard of it. It was one I'd never gotten around to watching, but yeah, really enjoyed it. But I think that something that's interesting is to see the escalation of what happens because they have, like you mentioned, that the Chris Pine character has this whole plan, like where he's going to it's everything that they do. They hit small banks right when they open or before they open. There's nobody there. They get cash that's not in bundles. They don't get anything above, I think, 50s because they have the die packs on them, and so they're very smart about it. And then they leave, go back to the land around the ranch or whatever. And then one of the things I thought was interesting is they buried the cars after they were done. So they like dug these huge holes out. That's brilliant.
I love that. Like, we got a tractor, we can just bury every car we steal. It's just right. It's so like I don't know. There's something about, I don't know if you're like me. I think a lot of people are like this, and that's why there's so many shows like Sons of Anarchy and other stuff. There's something about outlaw mindset and outlaw culture that we all, or at least many of us, gravitate towards, and there's always this sort of Robin Hood-esque underlining to it. Well, not always, but in many cases, like this movie, there are certain characters that have a complicated psychology and a complicated background, um, who display that sort of outlaw mentality, but they live it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're the manifestation of it. Whereas for most of us, we don't want to risk losing our freedom to enjoy the freedom that we actually have. You know what I mean? Like if you look at your constitutional rights and you look at the penal codes, it's like, well, wait a minute, these don't match up. You don't actually have freedom to travel. You don't act if you have to have a license to do this and that, and you have to
Mhm.
be charged a fee to, go drive through this overpass with a camera on it. And it's like, I think a lot of people gravitate towards that. And that's why there's so many characters in the movie who kind of like support the bank robbers. You know what I mean? It's like, even the waitress, like, again, I forget her name. She was in Eastbound and Down.
Katie Mixon.
Yeah, yeah, I really like her. She's really pretty gal and a
Yeah.
good actress. Anyways, she kind of reminded me of like one of the wives in Sons of Anarchy or something like that. The
Mhm.
way that she responded to law enforcement and the way that she was like, just defiant. Like, you want to take this tip as evidence, come back with a warrant. In the meantime, it's going to be putting a roof over my daughter's head. You know what I mean? And Jeff
Right.
Bridges was just like, I'm going to go sit down with these good old boys over here. But it was like everybody kind of, they couldn't say it, but they were supporting the outlaw mentality here, which, comes into that gray area where it's like, as a viewer, you really like Jeff Bridges and you really like Antonio, the character, the American Indian character. You
Mhm.
really like them. They're likable characters, and they're complex too. They back and forth over racial issues in a way that's like, whoa, that's a relic from, an older time, and it's like, but it's totally normal where they are and when they are. And same with the two brothers. It's like you really gravitate towards them. Even the more violent, unhinged older brother, there's certain scenes where you're like, I kind of like this guy.
Oh yeah.
I'm rooting for all of them. And I think that's something that you don't get in a lot of movies, especially now where all the characters are gray in the sense of there's not a good guy, there's not really a protagonist or an antagonist, or if there is, there's all these unsavory aspects about them. Not that these characters don't have their unsavory aspects, but they also have the outlaw mindset that a lot of viewers will gravitate towards.
Yeah, no, I did 100%. I think that's very well said. And I think Henley wants to know, this is the Tolkien logo. He wanted to know what was on my hat. And yeah, it's the J.R.R. Tolkien sort of symbol logo, whatever it's called. But yeah, I mean, I think that the point about the outlaw is, and that's something that's always been, I've always really liked. I really like anything like, yeah, I liked Sons of Anarchy up to a point. This show kind of, in my opinion, went off the rails at the during the sixth season. But yeah, I mean, I really liked that, and I really like the Sin City films, and I'm
Yeah.
not like a comic guy, but I enjoyed the graphic novels as well. I thought those were really well done because it's people who are, and yes, it's somewhat exaggerated, but and even like with Sicario, like Benicio del Toro's character, Alejandro, he's sort of his motivations are sort of unclear, and he's virtuous, but he also doesn't. He sort of operates outside the law as well, and I think that there's something, and same with a lot of the characters in like Sin City and in Hell or High Water as well, because at the end, the where Jeff Bridges' character, just jump ahead a little bit, and we can certainly backtrack. But just what I was thinking about this, where Jeff Bridges' character comes to, Chris Pine's family's house on the ranch at the end, and they're talking because suspects that he knows he was involved. He just can't prove it, and he's retired at that point. But and Chris Pine has the character. I'm saying the actor's name. I can't think. I have it pulled up. I can't think of Toby was Chris Pine's characters.
Right.
And he said, like my grandparents were poor. I grew up poor. My parents grew up poor. My grandparents were. It's like a disease that gets passed down, through generations. And then he says something about like how his son, he's it's not going to be the same thing for his sons, because that's who all the money's going to. That he's breaking that cycle, because ultimately it's not, because it kind of seems like, oh well, they're just doing this for he and his brother are just doing this for their own gain. But it's like, no, he's doing it ultimately for the good of his family, because I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but they found oil on the ranch. So the cows are all gone. They didn't have enough money to feed them, so I guess they sold them off or whatever. And so that's they put in the pump jacks, and then they make the money off of it. And something I did want to touch on also, that you mentioned, that people are kind of on the side of, like, the people at the diner sort of on the side of the two brothers, is when they go back, when they get the photo of, they don't actually show this, but it's referenced towards the end of the movie. They get the photo of Toby, the Chris Pine character, and they go back and show the people at the diner, and they all say they don't recognize him. Now, it's sort of ambiguous. It's like, do they actually not recognize him, or are they just saying they don't recognize him? I tend to think it's, like you said, they're sort of on his side, and that they're not going, whatever this guy's doing, they don't know him, whatever his motivations are, they're not, because they probably all have beef with the with the bank, and like, the Katie Mixon character mentions that, like, she's got a mortgage she has to pay, so, and they're in a place where the economic conditions aren't very good, and so they're all struggling, and so it's kind of like, it's like Tim Lewis, a filmmaker, said this in the If a Tree Falls documentary, where this timber company gets their headquarters burned down. Long story. Look the documentary up. It's on YouTube. It's very good. But he said, sometimes it's like people didn't feel bad about it, because it's like, when you see this, this company's like, it's like seeing the bully get punched in the stomach, and they sort of felt something. And so it's like, if he's going and stealing from this bank that's, predating upon like pretty much everybody in town, then it's kind of like that, bully getting punched in the stomach, and they're, nobody's going to shed a tear over that, or try to screw over anybody that's doing that. They're not going to get the guy locked up for it. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So many of the characters in the movie are experiencing the austerity that those banks have put on them. You know what I mean? Like the brothers in Hell or High Water, Toby and Tanner is the one that Ben Foster plays. They have their mother took a $25,000 loan out on the family farm, and which turned into like a $42,000 lien. And they were basically looking at having their family property taken away by a bank who did a reverse mortgage loan, and gave and the guy in the banking office even told these guys, they were like, why are you helping us? Basically, what do you get out of it? And he said, look, you boys, I'm thrilled to see you being able to buy your land back. And he kind of, coaches them through how to do it, and how to do it financially. And he said, it's not right. They gave your mother the lowest amount of money that they could to ensure that they would get the most gain, which is basically stealing your land.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a story, very old in this country. You can go back to, like what, the 1940s and 50s, and look at characters like Charlie Pretty Boy Floyd. He and his partners were going across Texas and going across Oklahoma and robbing banks. And what they would do is they would go into the loan offices, and they would take the liens and they would burn them. So the banks had no means to harass all the people. And when he was finally murdered by what was becoming the FBI at the time, he was like, he had a hero's funeral. It's 72,000 people showed up for his
Wow.
funeral. And like, do we ever hear about that? No, we never hear about that. No one ever talks about it. Why? Because that's the worst story that the government ever wants people to be inspired by. That kind of behavior is exactly the kind of thing that like was shut down with his murder.
Wow. I didn't know the whole story about it. I'm gonna have to look more into that because that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm hard to say that it's hard to say anything bad about the guy based off that. And I think that gets to something interesting that I did a stream on this early on in the channel about the what's called the Farmers Holiday Association and the penny auction. So back when, I don't know if it was exactly during the Depression, but sometime around then, where they were like going and auctioning off people's farms, and because they couldn't pay their whatever, I guess, mortgages, whatever it was. And I'm not as fresh on the details as I was, but people would show up. It's like all their neighbors and friends would show up and would bid like a penny for everything, and nobody would go above that. And I'm not going to encourage any illegal activity. I'm not saying that, but people would make it clear, like, hey, if anybody showed up and tried to bid more than that, then it was not going to end well for them. And I say that to say that that's something you see in these kinds of places, that like, well, that's just non-existent. You get this sense that everybody is in this culture is like disconnected from each other. Is that there's no, and granted, I mean, I'm not, with like the penny auction, that's a totally different system in a different era. But I'm just making the point that it's and the reasons for that are probably many. I mean, things are definitely. I think in the post 9/11 era that I've noticed a definite sort of splitting of people, where people just aren't as like neighbors aren't as close. People don't have those same kind of community bonds that they once did. And I think that, and it's also, I think another part of that is that, like, nobody else, it's not like anybody else can do anything. It's not like, because everybody else is in just as bad of financial shape as the brothers, and their family are. It's because, and, like, Toby mentioned, like, he's, way behind on child support. And I don't think they ever actually say what he does for a living, but do you know if they ever said what he did?
Well, I don't know if he was being truthful or not, but when he was in the diner speaking to Katie Mixon Greer's character, he told her that he was in gas drilling, I think, and they talked about the difference between gas drilling versus oil drilling, and he made it sound like there's not much money in gas drilling anymore, and she said something like, "Well, I hear there's money in oil, drilling's drilling, right?" So there was sort of like, I think they're kind of laying out like maybe why that town is a bit of a ghost town now, because of government policy to slow down gas drilling in that location at that time, and how that can affect an entire town. And the other thing I wanted to mention was kind of building on what you were just saying, when this sort of when this thing happens to a location, it doesn't happen overnight. It's like generational. And Ben Foster's character, there's a talk they have by the fence at one point on the property, and Ben Foster's character reveals that the reason he was in jail for 10 years is because their father was abusing them, and he abused him until he was old enough to fight back, and kicked his butt and shot him, and went to jail for it. And I think that's one of the reasons that Toby, Chris Pine's character, has so much understanding and sympathy for his brother, and who he is as, you know, an adult man at that point in his life. But like, you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, the banks did this to me. It's like, no, this has affected, like Toby said at the end, to Marcus Hamilton, Jeff Bridges' character. It's like a disease that goes down through generations. You laid out, you mentioned it earlier, and it's like it sets up a whole context for, or like an underlying context for the scenery and the interactions that you're seeing.
Yeah, that's a good point about the generations. Is that it's not like no town just dries up overnight. You know, it's not like this isn't the gold rush era. You know, where it's like it seemed like
Right.
towns would just disappear overnight, and yeah, so there's kind of that slow decay, and then for a lot of people, and I know there's areas of this country like in South Carolina, where they had these mills that were there, these textile mills, and then they shipped all those jobs off to other places to I think Brazil. A lot of them went to Brazil, and then it's like these towns. It was slow. It was over time they have less and less jobs. Finally, there's nothing, and then basically it's like the people are just stuck there because it's like you don't have any. There's no economic opportunity. There's no work, meaningful work, so you can't get enough money to leave. And it's probably the same thing in those places. It's like you're just barely trying to scrape by, working at the diner, being a bank teller or whatever. And so anyway, yeah, it's a sort of slow kind of decay. And I thought it was seeing that decay, because a lot of times the decay we see, there's the idea of like Death Wish, for example, the Charles Bronson movie where it's sort of like this urban decay, and there's other, I think Taxi Driver, you see that as well. And so
Yeah.
seeing it in a sort of remote, kind of dusty location, I thought was a nice touch to have that, where it looks different than it might in New York City, but it's pretty interesting to see what they did with that.
Yeah, I love that, man. I don't know why there's a lot of that coming at me in entertainment lately. Like metal, right?
Oh yeah.
There's this band from Dallas. We went and saw them a couple weeks back. They played with a black metal band from Texas called Absu. But one of the opening bands was called the Black Moria, and they're from Dallas, Texas, and they do like they do a certain style of black metal that I've never heard before. And I mean, it's essentially blackened metal of some sort, but there's like it's kind of like being stuck in a desert with a bunch of zombie cowboys on LSD or something like that. It's really an interesting vibe that they have. They have songs like Death Valley and At Night in the Desert, for example, that are just really crazy. They've got like they really have a desert vibe to them. And when we saw them live, they're all wearing like, like zombie cowboy hats. And, the singer had this, crazy long knife hanging off his belt. But I was like, wow, I've never like been thrown a desert vibe before with my blackened metal. So this is kind of interesting, guys.
Yeah, you said it was the Black Moria
Yeah.
and Absu.
Moriah, the Black Moria.
Okay.
And Absu's like Texas royalty and black metal royalty. They've been around for over 30 years. And they put on the most amazing show. It was super awesome.
Nice. I know. I think I've heard of Absu before. I don't think I've ever listened to them. I wrote those names down so I can.
You'll like
go,
it, dude.
Look those up.
Absu, they write concept albums. So there's one album that's based in. Oh no, there's like a trilogy of albums that are based in like Celtic mythology, and then there's another one that's based in like ancient Sumerian mythology. There's a lot of like weird, distasteful Kabbalah stuff in there, but it's like 30 years old, and it's a really cool like atmosphere that band creates.
No, I'm into that. I like when bands kind of dig into mythologies and histories and things like that. And I do I like the idea of doing the black metal sort of in the with like Western themes, because a
Yeah.
lot of, I mean, black metal comes from Norway, where it's it's snowy and dark like
Yeah,
11
they don't
months
have
out of the year.
cowboys there
But
and deserts. They just have Vikings and fjords and shit, right?
yeah, exactly. And so I think it's cool because so much of, and even black metal that's not from there, and other kinds of, it often focuses on like there's what common themes of like cold and snow and ice and darkness and like Transylvania and these kinds of things, and so to have that and to do something different with that, to put a different sort of I guess aesthetic, if you will, spin on it with the sort of the desert cowboy kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like that. Which funny enough, just thinking of cold, it's funny that like Frozen Soul, being from Texas, and it's like all of their lyrics are just about like ice and snow and
Yeah.
being frozen and these kinds
Oh
of
man,
words.
now that I'm been here, 10 summers or whatever, like I can relate. It's like you think about cold a lot. You think about rain and all these other things as you walk outside and it's just like, oh my God, it is melting out there. Like this summer hasn't been that bad, but most of the last 9 summers have just been like, leave me indoors. Just put me indoors with AC and leave me there. Give me a microphone and I'll just stay inside.
That's the way to do it. Quick digression. I was going to ask you this question during the last stream, and I forgot. And now I have to, because I always ask this of people whenever I meet people who are also into metal. I always have to ask people this question because there's no right or wrong answer. It's totally
I like this
subjective. But
already.
I feel like you can tell a lot about a person by how they answer this. So maybe you're not into either, but I am curious. Would you say, are you more of a carnivore guy or a typo negative guy?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, both Peter Steele bands, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, there's somewhere inside of me, there's a young skate punk that loved Carnivore, and somewhere in me, there's the guy that went to see Pantera, and Typo Negative opened, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" I guess there's some vampire goth rock happening right now, and like, I'm going back to the bar until Pantera comes on, and then later in life was like, okay, why are people so obsessed with these albums? And then listened to them and became obsessed with them myself. So I would say that the young skate punk in me would definitely say Carnivore. And if you put some Carnivore on right now, I'm going to say Carnivore. But if you sit me in a dark room and ask me if I'm going to listen to Carnivore or Typo Negative, I'm probably going to pick Typo Negative and throw that into the headphone amplifier and just go to outer space or cry or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I love Typo Negative. So I'd say at this point in my life, the answer is Typo Negative, but at an earlier point, the answer would have been Carnivore.
Yes, I would agree with a lot of that. Because I remember hearing Carnivore when I was a kid, and a lot of, I think Carnivore is cool, especially as it's cool if you find it as a young person,
Mm-hmm.
because the songs are, because when I was a kid and you hear songs like whether it's Carnivore or World Wars 3 and 4, male supremacy or whatever it is, or Jesus Hitler, and it's
SMD.
like, yes, a lot of these songs, like some of them are just outrageous, but a lot, it's kind of over the top and offensive, and it's also really hard. But then as you get older and you realize that, wow, there's actually, these songs are, the lyrics are way deeper
Yeah.
than I had realized, and I
Angry
mean,
neurotic Catholics.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's I think there's something to a lot of those songs.
Race
And
War. Have you listened
Race
to
War,
Race War
yeah.
lately? Oh my God. You listen to that and you're like, whoa, Peter Steele, where are you? Come back, man.
I know, man. We need him now more than ever.
Seriously.
Um, yeah, I mean, I remember when I finally it hit me what Jesus Hitler was actually about, because it's just sort of this outrageous, like offensive scenario. But then you realize, like, no, this is a song about like very deep, severe like inner turmoil and
Yeah.
crisis of being torn between wanting to do good and wanting to do bad, and using these very sort of figures that are like on the polar opposites of the moral spectrum. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, like Typo Negative is just I'm a huge fan. Love
Yeah,
Typo
me
Negative.
too, man. If I were to walk away and go bring my battle jacket out, you would see typo all over it, and sadly, you would not see carnivore on it. So that probably
Mm,
says something.
yeah, no, I get it. It's carnivore patches are also a lot harder to come by
Yeah, that's the other
than
thing,
Typo.
man. Yeah, definitely. I think you can get them at oh, what's that joint called? I'll think of it. I'll give it a shout out if I think of it.
Cool. Yeah, I've been wanted to ask that because
Great question. I
I'm always
love it.
very curious about
Well,
that.
I'm going to use that to litmus test people too. I think that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free. It's
Pull
you
the
can learn a
plug
lot about
patches.
people.
Thanks to Jason Unchained. That's it. Pull the plug patches. My goodness, their selection is insane. I don't know how they license so many of them, but you want to build a battle jacket, go to Pull the Plug.
Yes, that is the place to go. They have really interesting designs. Good stuff. Yeah, definitely. I saw some of the. I went to the. Not to get too far into a metal digression, folks. We will get back to the movies here in a second, but
They seem to be digging it anyway.
yeah, people like it. People like the music digressions. But I went to the. It was the Decibel tour. I think last year, or year before. I think it was 1 year before.
Oh,
That was when they had.
who was on the bill that year? We just went, or I went this year. It was Mayhem and Imperial Triumphant and Mortiz.
Oh, that's a great lineup.
It was
That's really
amazing.
good.
I had a blast.
Yeah, I went. It was Dark Funeral and Cattle Decapitation, who I
Mm,
will admit I'm not a fan of either band. And
both great
so
live though, right?
I actually didn't stay. I actually left because Black Braid opened and was I'd heard of Black Braid for like a few days before the show. I was like, I definitely want to check them out. I was blown away. It was a 30
Nice.
minute set. Like they played exactly 30 minutes, but it felt like an hour long set in a good way.
Yeah.
It was absolutely. I mean, one of the tightest live bands I've ever seen.
They smashed an hour worth of riffs into 30 minutes like Rain and
Yeah.
Blood.
Yes, exactly. So they were really good, and then 200 Stab Wounds played second,
Oh, I
and
love them. Yeah.
yeah, they were phenomenal. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is so I left anyway. I left after 200 Stab Wounds just because I really can't stand Cattle Decapitation. So I was like, I don't think I can
You don't
suffer
like the
through their
Gollum
set.
vocals or what?
No, I can't stand them. It's the vocals, and then I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was you who made the point that I think it was on a Boiler Room a few years ago that I think it was like right before. It was right before COVID. Like they put out some song or album about like just like killing all of humanity,
Bring
and
back the
then they were
plague.
one of the first bands to do like they're all in their houses by themselves
Yeah,
doing like those Zoom music videos where they're all wearing masks, and
yeah,
you made
dude.
the point like what's going on here? Like this
What,
seems like it's not quite lining up,
like
which I always thought was funny.
cheerleading their false end of humanity over a fake disease. I mean, given they wrote the song before it happened, so you know that there is that, but it's like I actually so to me, I remember that episode now that you bring it up. But to me, my favorite sort of piece of unintentional predictive programming was written by Peter Tardkin's son. I forget his name right now. I follow him on Instagram, but shout out to Peter from Hypocrisy and Pain. They wrote a song. His son wrote a lot of the lyrics on this album, and it was called Chemical Whore, and it was about the dangers of who's big RX industry. And my goodness, it was like, wow, them's are some prophetic lyrics right there. Like, it was so good. It's probably one of my favorite modern Hypocrisy albums, whatever the most recent one was. It came out in like 2021 or late 2020, something like that. But that was absolutely amazing. But yeah, Cattle D. I actually like Cattle D. I'm a fan. Spore and I went and saw Cattle D and Atheist right before this all happened. Like we're talking early 2020,
Oh
like
wow.
January or something like that. We saw him at the Empire Garage in Austin. Awesome show. Shout out to Kelly from The Atheist. Got to hang out with him for a little bit. Travis, I've never met, but just his lyrical take on humanity and stuff. It's very death metal. You know what I mean? It's like it's very death metal. I'll give you that. It's metal AF, and I don't actually mind the angry golem squealing that vocal style that he's picked up, because he can still roar when he needs to roar. But having a lot of people love that or hate that. It's sort of one of those polarizing things. But they were freaking awesome last time we saw them. So shout out to Cattle D, even though they like ride the wave of climate change grift and pandemic grift, and they just love the like leftist talking points and psyops.
Yeah, they really seem to, which I think is and it doesn't seem genuine. Like I went and saw Napalm Death and the Melvins a little while back, and like Napalm Death, like those guys have been, I think, principled in their political beliefs for what 40 years or whatever. And so if you see Napalm Death, like these guys aren't just, they're like real true blue, I don't know, anarchist or whatever they are. It's not like you're getting some like, oh yeah, we're gonna I don't think they were, to my knowledge, they were not wearing masks doing Zoom music videos in their own houses. So
I
it's
hope not, man. I didn't really, I mean, I know they played what's that big UK festival, Download or something like that. I think it might have been Download. Like they made a big deal about them playing Download in 2021, and I was like, I was really worried about all the touring bands and musicians that I'm a fan of in 2021 in particular, because none of them were allowed. They were all clamoring to get back on tour, and none of them were allowed to tour without, injecting the what. And I was just like, man, I don't have a good feeling about this. And, a whole bunch of them are gone now. I'm just saying, maybe it's coincidence, but a whole bunch of them are gone now. And Ozzy's cause of death came out, and it was myocarditis, pretty much.
Really, I hadn't heard that the cause of death had come out. That is interesting.
Yeah, so sorry to all the conspiracy theorists that said he did assisted suicide. It turns out he may just, have had the same thing happen to him that so many people that, we know of already have had happen to them in various ages, including youth.
Yeah, definitely. It's very sad to see. But yeah, I mean, at least Ozzy, at least he got to live. He did a lot. He had a long
dude.
career.
You couldn't have a better like life narrative and ending, bookend on a life like that. I mean, a lot of people are really upset about it. But for me, I'm just happy that he lived his life and did what he did his whole life, like Lemmy. You know what I mean? It's just like Lemmy was only a few weeks off tour, a couple months, something like that. Ozzy, I mean, best rock concert ever for anyone that was there. Probably a lot of people would say, you can't top that. And then leaves the planet surrounded by all of his kids in his mansion in his hometown, where he's like a hero now. I mean, going from the crazy guy that Jimmy Swaggart was trying to ruin to the guy that has met the Queen and has all these accolades, twice inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, biggest last show ever. I mean, come on, it doesn't get any better than that. Short of maybe not having been predated upon by the big pharma, but hey, that's a story for another time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, really, he and Lemmy both had really, really incredible, careers, and I think to this day, still the maybe the saddest thing I've ever seen was there was I don't know if it was the last show Motorhead played. I think it was one of the last shows they played where I think they only got like a few songs in and they had to stop. And then Lemmy came out like, I don't know, 10 minutes later or something, and it sounded like he was crying. And he was like, I'm sorry. Like, I want to play for you. I just can't. Like, physically, I just can't. And it's like, man, like that's what the guy's been doing for what, basically his entire adult life.
Since
he was in Hawkwind, and then he started Motorhead, and like that's all he had ever done. And, then he gets diagnosed with cancer and 4 days later is gone.
It's crazy, right? It's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. And now he's a bronze statue at the Rainbow, where I've partied a number of times, and like people go there. The people will, go there just to take their picture with Lemmy's statue and be in the place where he hung out.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. That's,
I mean, the only reason I went there was because I was hoping he would show up. I used to go to places where I knew rock stars would be. There was and other weirdos. There was a Denny's in Daly City where Anton LaVey used to hang out, and I used to stop there all the time, hoping I might run into him. I had some questions, and then there was, that too. There was a number of places where I knew people hang out and would go there. But the Rainbow, it was like, I want to see Lemmy. That was the reason I'm going.
That'd be awesome to have seen him there sitting at his what was that, like, video poker thing? He always
He was into the
like,
video poker, right?
yeah, that was a big thing. But it was interesting that you mentioned sort of you said something about Jimmy Swaggart. That reminded me of, to get back to the movie real quick. That reminded me of that scene where was it Malcolm or not Malcolm Marcus? Was it Jeff Bridges' character? I can
Mark. It was Mark. Antonio, I think, right?
Or Alberto.
Alberto, thank you.
Alberto and Marcus are sitting in the hotel room, in the motel room, and Alberto's trying to go to sleep, and Marcus is just like, he has his own room, but he's just like sitting in there annoying him basically, and
making racist jokes.
Yeah. Which some of those jokes I was like, dang, I'm surprised they got those through. But
full on like unfiltered grandpa talk from the South.
Oh yeah, 100%. But there was that scene where they're in the motel room, and Alberto they're kind of talking about religion, and Alberto has some televangelist, like prosperity gospel kind of preacher on the TV who looks like Joel Osteen in the backdrop. Like, it's obviously sort of stand-in, if you will, for Joel Osteen, and he if I remember correctly, the line's correct. It's like Alberto says something like, he asked him if he's if he is a believer or whatever, and he's like, yeah, but not in whatever that guy is talking about. Because I thought that was sort of interesting that there was that kind of rejection of this.
He said, God don't talk to this guy. That's for sure.
That's right. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and I mean, I think really he's correct about that. Like that what that guy is selling is there's nothing Christian about that, because it's just like it's just God wants you to be happy and successful and wealthy, and send me money, and God will bless you with wealth or whatever. And it's and that kind of stuff is on all the time, but on TVs. But I think that was intentional, because it shows that this is something that's readily available on TV, and those kinds of preachers intentionally prey on vulnerable people, because when people nobody's going to the guy who is claiming that he can just touch people and they can get up out of their wheelchairs, because that's not their first resort. That's not their first. That's like desperate. That's like a last resort.
The hand of God, Maddie.
Right. So I thought that was definitely some cultural commentary that I agreed with entirely.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone that doesn't know, the reason we mentioned Jimmy Swaggart and Ozzy is because in the 80s, when the PMRC was being run by Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, they were going after Twisted Sister, Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, Wasp, a number of other bands, and they were trying to get them banned. And that was the beginning of the labeling of albums, saying, explicit content and all that stuff. And there were lawsuits. Anytime a metalhead kid would commit suicide, they would try to blame Ozzy or someone like that. And Ozzy's song called Miracle Man is sort of a response to that. And he mentions Jimmy Swaggart by name, because Jimmy Swaggart really tried to ride this propaganda wave of total BS and blame Ozzy, the Prince of Darkness, in particular. And Ozzy, like, our friend Odd Man Out is an Ozzy fan too, and he's been posting a lot about this. And same with Chuck Ocelli and some of our other broadcaster friends out there. Ozzy didn't really want to be the Prince of Darkness. You know, he wanted to be more of like an Elton John type of guy. Like that's where he probably would have gone, like a heavier edged Elton John. But you know, Ozzy is Ozzy. And he said, you know what, if I'm going to be the Prince of Darkness, you know, if this guy wants to call me the Prince of Darkness, fine, I will be the Prince of Darkness, you know. But it's like, it's a character basically that, you know, was kind of forced on him by the PMRC and by Jimmy Swaggart. So, you know, interesting side note.
Yeah, yeah. The Ozzy thing is interesting because I've been going back and listening to some Black Sabbath and Ozzy, you know, since his passing. And I made this comment. I made this comment to a few people. I think I made it first to Jethro. Shout out to Jethro. That it's the whole like Sabbath sound. It was like, isn't it wild that Tony Iommi accidentally chopping his fingertips off is basically responsible for, I don't want to say metal entirely because there were other influences from other bands, but I mean a lot of you know, I mean particularly like doom metal and that kind of thing. And then from what I understand, I mean a lot of the lyrics weren't even written by Ozzy. I think it was either Billboard or Geezer Butler that wrote most of them. And so
Geezer.
Ozzy, yeah, Geezer, that's right. It was Geezer that wrote most of them. And so Ozzy kind of, you know, just kind of fell into this role. And just one last comment on Tipper Gore. If I remember correctly, I think Tipper Gore sat in on drums with the Grateful Dead at least once.
No,
so I
really?
gotta look that up. I'm pretty sure that. Let me see. I don't want to. Yes. Okay. So it looks like Tipper Gore did indeed. Where is it? Yeah. She has played drums with members of the Grateful Dead, and during the second night of the spring 2009 Dead tour, Tipper Gore sat in playing drums during the song Sugar Magnolia. And then, yeah, she also played with Willie Nelson
Dude,
at Farm Aid.
I have a buddy that used to sell Willie Nelson weed whenever he was in the foothills of California, the Sierra Nevada foothills. Like he was Willie's guy. So yeah, Tipper Gore. Here's another great headline. It's on faroutmagazine.co.uk. The moment Grateful Dead and Woody Harrelson got stoned in Al Gore's house. Just a puff or two. Oh, this is brilliant.
I mean, it's you know, if you believe the theories about you know the Grateful Dead's purpose being there to, you know, spread LSD throughout the U.S. and
What do you
maybe
think
the
about
UK.
that, man?
I don't know. I don't. I think that I don't know that one. I'm kind of divided on. Because it's like if that's the case, I mean, they crack down on that really heavily because if you watch some of the documentaries and you know news footage and things around that era, particularly when it got into the 90s, I mean, they like the 80s and 90s, they cracked down really, really hard on. And I know that, you know, sort of the powers that be are not a excuse me, are not a monolith, and people have different different tactics and priorities and objectives and things like that, but I think at least I think it was, I don't want to say it was I don't know, because I don't buy that the Grateful Dead was like like Esalen or Tavistock or something like that creation. I think they were a real band. I think they were perhaps. I think Owsley Stanley was a pretty, as the Brits say, a pretty dodgy character, and so I think that they probably had people kind of weasel their way into their camp. And I think it was in the documentary series that they did on Amazon. I think it was called Long Strange Trip that Amazon. I don't know if Amazon did it, but it's on Amazon. That's really good, actually. It's worth watching. But there. I think it was in that one where somebody from the Grateful Dead mentioned that like Jerry Garcia, you know, would, because they'd have like, I think they were talking about like Hell's Angels and some other kind of people that people didn't really want around, and so it seemed like they were pretty lax on they would because I think Jerry's response was like, oh well, you know, you got to have the good and the bad, so it didn't
Yeah.
seem like they really kept a strong gate on who they would associate with. So I don't think it was like I don't believe that the band was told like, all right, here's
your mission
yeah.
impossible, you're gonna corrupt society. Yeah, dude. I know. I'm kind of the same way. Like, I think there's something there, I mean, if you've read Dave McGowan's work, obviously, there's the ancillary and secondary relationships that, you know, beg a lot of questions, and there could be a there, as our friend Randy J would say. But it's like, I also don't like the guilt by association thing, and removing someone's ability to rebel against their parents or their country or whatever, especially, with the Echelon and the Laurel Canyon crew being as young as they were. But, however, that does not mean that, like you were kind of alluding to, shady management doesn't get involved. Plots get built around large movements, like we could talk about MI5 and their sort of like Aleister Crowleying of the Beatles, after the Beatles' first 3 albums. There's something there. And same with hip hop music, we've got information about influencers, if you will, not the modern kind, but the old kind, moving into those cultures and instilling certain ideologies. And it's like, it's not hard to nudge, right? Like, nudging is something that we know about real well on the internet right now. But in the old days, it's not like it's a new invention, right? In the old days, it was done in bars and at gigs and between managers and upper management at labels, who, if you look at the ownership on those, it's not very hard to see the political and national connections on them. So a manager, a producer, that you normally wouldn't be able to afford, that can nudge an entire culture to include the fans in certain directions. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the artist is in on the grift. It also doesn't mean the grift isn't happening.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I think that being aware of that, because yeah, I don't, as I've said many times, I don't, you can't control what you're like. One of the things nobody can control the circumstances of his or her birth, right? You don't get to choose where you're born. You don't get to choose your sex, your race, your ethnicity, your like any of this. Like nobody gets to choose it. These are the things you're born with. You're born where you're born, your parents, your relatives, like you can't control this. And so I think to just say like, oh, well, like Frank Zappa's dad was what he ran, I think the Wedgwood Arsenal or something. It's like, well, I'm a Zappa fan. I'm not like a super fan. I'm like an expert or scholar on his life, but I've seen nothing else to indicate that he was involved in. And I think he was just a serious musician who was also, kind of an odd guy and very intelligent. And so, yeah, it's like the guy just made really good music. And so I don't think that, I don't think something like that. I mean, you can't take these things in isolation. So it's like when somebody said, oh, well, so-and-so's dad did this. It's like, well, so what? Right. But like you said, I don't think that especially people when they start making a lot of money and, taking a lot of drugs. And that's one thing with Zappa. Like he never drank. He didn't take any kind of drugs. He just smoked Winstons and drank coffee. And so, yeah, but when people start making a lot of money, and then especially when they get in drugs, it's like, they're not going to be paying attention to, especially if they're not that astute to begin with. Like, I don't think any of the Grateful Dead they didn't strike me as particularly sharp people. And so, they're not going to be paying attention to, where they might be, like you said, where management might be pushing them, or, what they might be used for. Because, okay, say that, there was this effort to take a, million sheets of acid or whatever out onto it. Well, they may not have even known about that, right? Like, if somebody could go out into the lot and just like pass out LSD, and they wouldn't have any clue. Like, if you're not out there, then
yeah,
they're not going to have any idea what's going on.
And frankly, like, I've been in a lot of Grateful Dead parking lots, and there was always like the rumor about, the narc, watch out for the narc. The narc is here. I never saw the narc, I
Mm,
saw a lot of nitrous oxide balloons floating around out of, VWs, and I saw a lot of, uh, weed deals going on and stuff like that. And I was the guy in the Napalm Death tour shirt that didn't want to go inside the show. I just wanted to lurk in the parking lot and see what was going on, and what kind of head change I could walk out of there with. And so I've heard the Dead play many times, but I've never actually gone inside. But it's like I went to college at Humboldt State, which is now Cal Poly Humboldt, and I knew all the Deadheads. That was like all we had there was Deadheads, like
mhm.
people that like Grateful Dead and people that like Sublime. It was pretty much, or both, it was pretty much. Oh, and Cypress Hill. Those were like the biggest bands there for some reason. Go figure, Humboldt State.
Right.
Um, but like I've spent a lot of time around Deadheads, and I mean the cultural effect that they're talking about, I get it, I see it,
Mhm.
but I don't think that the guys actually riding that train high on cocaine, like I don't think those guys are actually like doing that on a mission. Like they're living the life, you know what I mean? They're
Right.
living that life. Um, so I don't know. It's an interesting one when you get into like that sort of Laurel Canyon analysis, and there's definitely something there, and we know what a lot of it is, and
Oh
we can
yeah.
see the effects of a lot of it. So cultural engineering is not something you can shake just shake your head at and say it doesn't exist. It is there. I mean, look
Hmm.
what's happened to the African American community after the CIA got involved with crack and hip hop and all of that, and the mass media. I mean, they've really done a disservice to the African American culture here in the United States, to the point where many cultural analysts don't think it's recoverable in many
Mm.
cases.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just the devastation that's been unleashed. I mean, particularly where they prosecuted crack differently than they did powder cocaine. It was harsher sentences. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a lot more, stiffer penalties, and so um, yeah, man. I mean, it's really tragic. I think what's been done, and I mean, that's they've been hit particularly hard, and I think what we're talking about with Hell or High Water is you also see that it's almost like it almost seems like they kind of test what they're doing on certain communities. So we see it with like the Native American reservations, where there's a lot of um, poverty and violence and alcoholism, and then we see uh, what happened with like with the African American communities with the crack epidemic, and then in largely white communities with the opioid epidemic, uh, and then yeah, I mean just the hollowing out of like what we see with the movie with the hollowing out there of where a lot of like beef production went to like South America and Australia. And it's like, well, wait, why are we importing beef from like we have all this land where we have these cows, but when like if there's not grass there for them to feed on, then you got to buy grain. Well, if the grain prices go, I mean, it's economics seem very simple until you start to think about how it all fits together, and then it becomes quite complex, and you see how it doesn't take long for these places to get completely hollowed out, and I mean I think it's pretty. I think, and the dysfunction that you see in a lot of those in a lot of communities, like for example, like what we see when Toby, the Chris Pine character, goes to visit his sons, and he's clearly like an absent father. Like he's not really around very much. Like his son doesn't really want to doesn't seem to want to talk to him. And then he asks, he's like, "Oh, where's your brother?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm at a friend's house, I guess. Who knows?" And their mom just kind of seems perpetually exasperated and
Deadbeat dad vibes, big time.
yes, yeah, 100%, like deadbeat dad and like out to lunch mom. So but it was interesting though, because his son's probably, I don't know, 15, 16 or something, and then he gives him a beer, and then his son never opens his, and then he said, his son says it at one point at the end of the conversation. He's like, you tell me not to be like you, but then you give me a beer. And I can't remember what Toby says, but he says something like he's acknowledging that,
It
like
says
he
good job, I think, or good
yeah, something
decision,
like
or
that, like good
yeah.
job, that he didn't take the drink. So I was like,
Almost like
oh,
it was like a cope, right? Like he brought him the beer to try to bond with him and hope he'd think it was cool. But then when he realized he was asking him to not be like him, him and his uncle, he realized, he had the realization that, oh my God, this, I might be able to actually get through to this kid. Like he's not even gonna. This is a 16-year-old that's not gonna open a beer that his dad brought him. Okay, maybe he is, gonna do good with football, do good in school, and then be a landowner that has, oil rigging going on the property. Like, and he tells him, he says, you're not gonna have to worry about money anymore, but
right.
don't be like me and your uncle.
And I think they said they're going to make the ranch, the drilling was supposed to make like 50K a year or 50K a month, I think.
Yeah,
Which
crazy.
I don't know what that. I'm just curious what that 50,000 times 12. That's $600,000 a year.
And the bank wants to steal it for a measly $40,000 because a hurting family with a mother, recently deceased mother, and a ex-con son and a deadbeat dad's son, right? Oh, 42, a measly $42,000. Like,
Yeah.
this is the kind of predatory nature that brings out, and another, kind of building on that outlaw thing. Like, when was the only time in biblical stories we saw Jesus get violent? It was with the bankers, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, there's almost this, like, that Robin Hood, you could almost elevate it to Christ like in some senses, because it's like these guys are whipping the bankers. That's
Yeah.
essentially what they're doing.
Yeah. That's a good parallel. And was it ever? Did they? I don't know if it was implied or if it was ever actually said. Did they know if the bank knew about the oil on the land?
I don't know. I'm not sure if that was mentioned or not. I think, to me, I didn't even go to that place in setting up the context in my head when I was analyzing it. It was kind of just like, it almost doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It could be a barren piece of land, or it could be a piece of land that has black gold under it. The bank is going to do the same thing to, both families. If a family has barren land, they're going to loan them that same 75,000 or $25,000 reverse loan, and try to take that land, and they'll do it, whether your land sucks or whether your land is rich.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, they don't, they're not going to discriminate on that. And uh, I had something I was going to say. Something you just said made me think of it. Now I'm. Oh, and I don't know exactly how reverse mortgages work or anything, but it seemed interesting that they got the thing for like 25,000. They ended up owing almost double that. So like
Yeah.
the 42, those I don't know exactly know how that works, but I was like, that seems like usury to me.
Exactly. Well, according to the Ministry of Truth, known as Wikipedia, a reverse mortgage is a mortgage loan usually secured by a residential property that enables the borrower to access the unencumbered value of the property. The loans are typically promoted to older homeowners and typically do not require monthly mortgage payments. And borrowers are still responsible for property taxes and homeowners insurance. And these reverse mortgages allow older people to immediately access the equity they've built up in their home. So basically, they feel they can market it like it's, a big loan and you have access to all your equity and all that stuff. But the rates are really high, and the foreclosure rate on these particular loans has been traditionally very high. And the product, if you will, the note, you risk fraud and other scams, and there's a lot of misleading advertisements. So that's what they say over at Wiki.
So it seems like the bank, the lender, and the borrower are basically betting against each other. Like the borrower is betting that they will like the bank is betting that they'll outlive the, I guess, terms of or the lender is betting that they'll, like the borrower will outlive the terms of the loan. So basically they can take their house and before and not have beforehand, and then the
then
person is basically betting that they'll not outlive the so because it's like, okay, well, and then they're dead, so they're not going to lose their house basically.
And the bank gets to mortgage it off the moment they die.
Right. Man, that's I don't know how that's. I mean, I was going to say I don't know how that's legal, but
it's nasty. There's a thing called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So they warn people about that, but it's like I don't see that they have any teeth in the fight. They're just sort of. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about it, but it doesn't seem like it's very effective.
Well, I think it's pretty telling that that Trump and Elon Musk did their best to they tried to completely get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So make it. We're not going to get into that, but I'm sure people have heard me talk about that enough. But make of that what you will. But yeah, so they go to this bank. Where, just to get back on the plot here, they go to this bank where, because one of the banks they go to rob is closed, and so it's been chained up, I guess, for fear of being robbed. So they kind of strategize, like, okay, where we have to figure out the place that we're going to go, right, to
the next best score.
Right. Yeah. And then the same thing with the Marcus and Alberto are trying to figure out, like, oh, where are we going to go? Like, where's the place they're going to hit? Or Marcus is trying to figure it out, and Alberto's kind of just, he doesn't quite get it.
Marcus's character is very smart too, and Alberto thinks it's tweakers the whole time, and Marcus is like, no, this is some good old boys that are looking to make a certain amount of money for a certain reason, and he was totally right.
Yeah, he nailed it. Yeah, because he was like, no, there's no way tweakers could have pulled this off.
So many good one-liners. One of my favorite one-liners when they were talking about that was he's saying tweakers wouldn't do this. Tweakers are sleeping, and Alberto's character, by the way, played by Gil Birmingham, says tweakers don't sleep. They tweak. I was laughing so hard. I was like, yeah.
That was a great line. So they end up hitting a bank that is that's more crowded. And of course,
very crowded. They walk in and it's just like there's people in line. There's like 40 people in there probably.
Yeah, like whole lobby full, and they say later after they rob it, they're like, oh well, it was payday or whatever, and so they go through, do their routine, like give us the certain amounts of money, not like the hundreds, not the bundles, those kinds of things, and so they're getting the tellers to open the drawers, and then one of the tellers, you can see she texts somebody and says, like, we're being robbed, get up here, and there's a guy who's because it's Texas, right? People carry firearms. So this guy, you can kind of see he's trying to get his gun out, and so then on the way out, Tanner, the Ben Foster character, ends up shooting the security guard, because that's who the teller was texting, was this armed security guard. So he ends up shooting him, and he shoots the guy who's trying to get his gun out too, doesn't he? Or does he?
I think so. Yeah,
I think he shoots him as well. And so then they go to leave, and of course, there's a bunch of people out there waiting for them. So they open fire. They're chasing them, and then
the good old boys, the good old boy network. There was a good old boy network aspect in the whole movie, and you see it after the first robbery, because Marcus pulls up to go to the initial investigation, and a good old boy drives up in front of him. He's talking to him, and he's like, gives him everything he knows about it. And the guy's like, well, he goes, keep your eye out for any unsavory characters. I forget the word he used, out of town characters, something like that. And the guy is like, yeah, we'll take care of it. We'll get a rope. That kind of thing is basically said, we'll get a rope, and then like after that robbery you're describing, there's this whole network of good old boys that get in their Ford F-150s and start chasing after this guy, which again is a very Texan thing. Like if you look at the forget the name of it, it was like in South Texas. I forget the name of the church, but there was a church shooting allegedly. A little bit of a dodgy narrative on that one. We had our friend journalist Mark Anderson actually went out there and looked at the scene and came up with a whole bunch of odd anomalies, but that's a story for another time. Anyways, the narrative is that this guy went into this church, shot it up, and that a local chased him down in his truck and was the one that shot him with his, long rifle. So there is definitely that factor. That is an accurate factor for, Texas context.
And I remember, I think there was a few years ago, was there like I think there was a guy who went into a restaurant or something or a cafe in Texas and like started shooting, and then somebody just like got up and blew the guy away.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, it was a Mexican joint in Houston, I believe. And this guy came in with a fake gun and started trying to hold the place up. And this dude just reached in his waistband, smokes this guy, ventilates him, and then like he was pissed that he had to do it. He's like, damn, he ruined my life. I don't know what he said, but he had that kind of look like, it's just a security cam, but he had to look like he was pissed that happened. And he just walked out and left. I mean, he went home. They didn't even find the guy for a few days later. And then when they did, they didn't even charge him because he didn't do anything wrong. And it was like, but there's another story. My colleague, Timothy Shea, called me the other day. I haven't found the article to go with this one yet, so it's anecdotal, but he goes, did you hear about that guy that tried to rob some kind of Quick Mart in Texas, and every person in the Quick Mart pulled out their concealed carry and shot this guy? And I was like, no, but it sounds like where I live.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't heard that one. That's good for them.
You don't want to
and
mess
so
around here, man. It's not a good place to mess around.
I would shoot. I mean, I think more places should be like that. That's keeps people helps keep things in check, I think.
Makes it polite sometimes for people with a polite nature.
Yes, yeah, 100%. But yeah, and so one of the things we see is Toby ends up getting shot through and through in the side in the ensuing gunfight, and I noticed something that the relationship between the two brothers seemed to, in some ways, I was sort of comparing it and contrasting it with the relationship between George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino's characters in From Dusk Till Dawn. Where it was
my
kind of
crazy brother.
Yeah, exactly. And it was almost kind of reversed though, because George Clooney's character, he was like the ringleader of sorts, but he was the one who was, there's that great scene. Well, it's not great because of what Tarantino's character has just done to the bank teller, but he's like, where Clooney says something like, "I am a professional thief. I do not assault women. I don't kill people that I don't have to." And whereas sort of the even though the mastermind was Toby, sort of the ringleader is Tanner, and he's the one that sort of unhinged, which is sort of reversed in From Dusk Till Dawn, which is
right.
Brilliant movie, one of my favorites. But
love it.
Yeah, and so they get into this shootout, and then they left Toby's car outside of town. So they're getting chased, and then they stop at one point, and Tanner has a rifle he's modified to be full auto, and it's like as soon as the full auto fire starts, like the good old boy caravan like takes off, right?
They hit reverse. They thought they were pretty badass with their like hunting rifles and stuff, and then Tanner comes out with his SAW or whatever he had set up there and just started mowing stuff down. That was I love me some gunplay in a movie, and that was definitely top notch.
Yeah, it was really well done. And I've never been in the gunfight, but it seemed realistic. All of the gun sequences. But so then Toby he kind of gets away, and he takes off with the money.
They split
It's
up, right? They,
Yeah,
they
they
they have a
split up.
conversation, and you can kind of tell it might be their last conversation. Like two brothers, like, is this it? I don't know. We're gonna
Right.
split ways here, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and that was and that whole kind of scene leading up to that is, I think that it was good to see that Ben's character, Tanner, is that right? Yeah, is that he's not completely, he is crazy, but he's sort of unhinged and unpredictable, but he's not like a total psycho. And because you can see that there's scenes where like he genuinely cares for his brother, which like they're very, not like in a weird way, but like in a normal kind of family. Like they're very physically affectionate.
Yeah.
They're
And he
like,
knows he's willing to say, and what you don't realize until the end of the movie is that Tanner's willing to sacrifice himself in a very outlawish manner to benefit um the other guy's kids, right? To benefit Toby's kids. Like
yeah.
that's how the thickness of blood and water works for that character.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very, very. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he basically let Toby get away, and because he sort of drew the attention away from the from the law enforcement, and so yeah, they end up chasing him up that. Which, how does he get law enforcement back on his tail? Now I can't remember
He
now.
takes he takes the truck, and I forget what Toby takes, but Tanner takes the truck and drives off and has they're having chase, basically they're being chased like you're saying. They get out of the car. Tanner pulls out the heavy weaponry, starts spraying lead at the good old boy network, and that's those guys all take off. And I think that's when they split. I'm going from memory of the first time I watched the movie now because I didn't get as far into the movie today, but they split, and Tanner has all the cops basically follow him, and then he drives into a prairie basically and drives up a hill and then lights his truck on. I mean, it's pretty badass. The
Yeah.
way that he went out was in a blaze of freaking glory. He turned the truck they had stolen into it like a car bomb, basically caused a whole bunch of havoc, and then took the high ground and started shooting at Marcus and Alberto and all the other cops that had showed up, to devastating effect because Alberto's character takes a round to the head,
Hmm.
and then Marcus, who thought he was going to be the one that would, retire the next day and probably die before Alberto, you see him processing like, oh my God, this guy's still married and he's talked to me about, what he wants for his retirement, and my wife's gone. Why couldn't it have been me? There's this whole like complex sort of like thing that happens with Marcus's character when Alberto gets shot.
Yeah, and I think because Marcus says at one point, and I don't remember the exact context, but there's some question about like if Alberto has a family, or he says something like he has a huge one. So he clearly has like a lot of children, and he's uh, married, and very there's like a really stand up, virtuous kind of guy. And I remember now Tanner gets the cops' attention because he's driving the vehicle that's riddled with bullet holes, and he passes them on the
Yes,
road, and then
right.
they
They
turn
saw it.
around and come after him. So I was trying to remember, I was like, that was it.
It
But
was the good old boy bullet holes in the truck.
uh, one thing I liked about, I thought was really good about Marcus is, he's this very kind of gruff, seasoned ranger. Like he's been doing this forever. He's kind of seen it all, knows it all. But there's a very human moment where you can see that he genuinely has concern for other people, because there's the moment that Alberto gets around through his head. It's almost like he's about to fall apart, but he sort of holds it together, and then the good old boy network comes up, and he actually goes out into the opening away from the cover of the vehicles, and is like motioning from like, get back, like get away from here so you don't get, and he's opening himself up to get killed. And he's doing it to try to save others. So he really is, I think, a really virtuous, upstanding kind of character. And
You see a lot of that in Sons of Anarchy too, by the way. There's a lot of subplot lines and main plot lines that have that same sort of thing going on. This concept of sacrifice for the club or for your family, for your brother, or your fellow outlaw.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, loyalty is something that seems to be prominent in Taylor Sheridan's work,
Yeah,
and especially family loyalty. Because if we think about Sicario, with Alejandro, the Benicio del Toro character, is that he's even though his family has been murdered, like he's still fiercely loyal. Like everything he's doing is out of a sort of vengeful loyalty to his family, right? And so that I thought was so yeah, that's a recurring theme in Sheridan's work that I really like. But yeah, I think the Good Old Boy Network is interesting because yeah, it's kind of that sense of yeah. Jason says in the chat, actual justice system where it's like people who want to take this into their own hands because Marcus jumps in a vehicle with one of these guys and he's like, can you get me up behind behind the guy,
yeah.
behind Tanner, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'll have him field dressed on my hood in 10 minutes," So and then they get up there and they're basically going to shoot him from the back, and the guy, the good old boy that Marcus is with, is like, "Oh, let me do it," because he's got the rifle. He's like, "No, like there's no way." Marcus is like, "There's absolutely no way I can let you do this." Oh, you're on mute again.
Which I agreed with the good old boy, quite frankly, because Marcus's character was so winded when he got up there. And if you've ever taken a long distance shot with a rifle, you know that like breath control is kind of a big deal. And another thing that's kind of a big deal is knowing your zero on your tool, right? On your long rifle. And that was like the one thing in that movie where I was like, oh, it made me cringe, a little bit, because I was like, you don't know what that rifle's zeroed for, dude. Like if the good old boy would have at least said, hey, it's zeroed for 200 yards, I would have been like, okay, cool. But there was this moment where I was like, if that were me, I would be like, at least, or if Marcus had said, what's it zeroed for, or something like that. But that's neither here nor there. That's for shooting nerds like me.
I mean, I think that would have been an accurate kind of question though,
Yeah,
for him to, because I think they said it was like a 500-yard shot.
yeah, it was a long shot.
Yeah, which that was not. I mean, shoot, I don't think I would have made it,
It was,
but
it was not Trump's earlobe, that's for sure. Just hit the lobe, it heals fast.
uh, oh man, what a scene that was. But yeah, and I think though that another sense in which we see, I mean, Marx is obviously a human, but when we see sort of a human element is after he shoots Tanner, is there's sort of this rush of emotion that it is not exactly, it's not obvious what it is. It's he's obvious. It seems like he sort of starts to celebrate because he made the shot and he took the guy out, but then there's almost this sense of anguish that like he just shot this guy in the back of the head, and that there seems to be a uh,
Like a regret almost,
yeah,
right?
almost like a regret, like the sense that he just took somebody's life, and that's a pretty heavy. I mean, I've never done that, but I would imagine it's a pretty heavy thing. That there's got to
Yeah.
be a lot of a lot of emotion there.
Yeah, same here. I've however had people firsthand describe it to me, and I would say the few times that has happened, what we're sensing here is definitely tracks. And I feel like I don't have a specific example, but I feel like if you haven't seen this movie yet and you watch it after this, there's a whole bunch of now that we've spoiled it for you, there's a whole bunch of little like predictive moments that are in the dialogue leading up to where it all culminates at the end. And there are a number of moments between Marcus and Alberto where they get it, like they sympathize with these guys and they're impressed by these guys, you know what I mean? Like you could see how, and it was so, as a viewer, it was so like when Alberto takes the bullet, it's jarring. It's just like
Mhm.
the way they cut, the way they edited the scene and went from him, in a gunfight to him dead on the ground is jarring. And it's just like, oh my God. And you feel it as a viewer, the way that it's edited. And then it cuts to Jeff Bridges' character, Marcus. And then you feel it through Marcus. Like Marcus has, like I was saying, this complex set of emotions go on. And Jeff Bridges is amazing. I mean, that guy's a fantastic actor. He was able to like project the series of thoughts just with like the look that he had, and then leading up to getting up the hill, shooting someone in the back. Like I imagine shooting a human in the back, whether it's an enemy or not, is something that is more amplifies regret of taking a life. You know what I mean? Like that guy didn't even have a chance. Like you're gonna go to sleep thinking about it every night, and then closing the thought with he didn't have a chance, right? And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And that's great as the winner of a gunfight, but it's not so great as someone who has to psychologically process what's happened the rest of their life.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it seemed like Tanner, because it was that shot where you see Marcus and the good old boy kind of like in the distance. So I don't know if it was just implied or if it was actually him seeing that they. It seemed like he saw that they were there, and he basically, I think he knew what was coming, and he just, I think he knew there was no way out. Like he knew he was going to die up there. Like
Yeah.
there was no getting out of it. And
He was committed from the moment he took that fully automatic machine gun out of his trunk. Like he thought he was amazed he didn't die there in the street because he didn't even bother to take cover, like you pointed out.
Oh yeah, he was just like out in the open, and he easily could have gotten taken out. But that I think that there's sort of a differentiation you could make between types of outlaws, of where and in the final scene where months later, however long it is, Marcus goes to see Toby, is that he recognized, like Marcus recognizes that Toby and Tanner are different. He was like, now your brother just did this because he wanted, like, he didn't say this, but he was like your brother's like a criminal, right? And he didn't need a reason to go rob banks. Like he said, your brother would have gone and if he would have been here, he would have had boats and jet skis and all that. He's like, he would have blown all the money just so he could go do more crime to make more of it. Whereas Tanner, it's like that, his ex-wife is still driving, I don't know, like a 90 something Ford Explorer or Excursion, whatever it was, Expedition. And, they don't live in a fancy house, like a very modest kind of ranch house. And
that they rebuilt where the family house was, which was a decrepit, like single wide or double wide or something like that. I loved that because I didn't get that until the second viewing, but there's all those scenes at the family house, like before all the stuff happens. And then there's the scene at the end. And at the end, it's like his estranged wife is there. His kids are there. The home is beautiful. The land is no longer desolate. The cattle are thriving, and he looks like someone that's living within the means of a guy that owns property that brings in $50,000 a month. There's no bank robber vibe. Everything's in a trust, and it's in a trust with the bank that they robbed. And the bank is like, that's when they sort of acknowledge the value of that land. At the end is when the cops go to the bank and they say, hey, these guys, this guy that's living, he's the brother of the guy that stole your money. Don't you want him caught? And they basically say, we're making X amount of dollars on this property every month. Why would we care about 7,000 measly dollars that were stolen when, they're making money and we're making money? And that to me was profound because it kind of shows like the Robin Hood effect, the success of the Robin Hood effect there, or the Jesus Christ effect or the Charlie Floyd effect, whatever you want to call it, being recognized by the the oligarchs, if you will, being recognized by the bankers and saying, no, we're not gonna. The bankers end up just like the waitress. We're not gonna squeal on these guys. These guys are paying us. These guys are cool to us. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like he criminaled with his brother's sacrifice. He criminaled his way into winning against the bank, and then the trust for the property owned by the very bank that he robbed is making money every month on what has happened. It's the perfect crime. It's one of like the most brilliant things about that script.
And it's a crime that you could actually see working. Like, it was realistic. Where, like, you could actually see that this could be a true story, and not one of those like so crazy that there's no way anybody could have made it up. Like, it was actually like it was very well planned and thought through. And I think that the motivation, you can see the difference in execution based on the motivation, because like when Tanner goes and like robs that bank by himself, and then there was something where he was like, oh, I think that was the one, like he used the same car or something, and he sort of went off script, so to speak. And Toby was
that
not,
was the one by the diner.
Yeah, where Toby was not happy about that, because he's not motivated by the thrill of going in somewhere, sticking a gun in somebody's face and coming out with a bunch of cash. Like, no, there's a specific, his motivations are entirely different.
Yeah, and he's upset because his brother has now disrupted his very structured plan. He had a very structured plan for this, and the next day they were supposed to go rob the third bank. But his brother decided to say, hey, I'm going to go take a dump. And then he went and robs a bank while homie's paying the check. And it's like, then they have to go bury the car and do the whole thing again and get a new car. And that pushes the schedule. And they have this interesting argument about it. And his brother's like, what are you tripping about? I just took another step forward. We have time to push the schedule now. And he's just got, $20 bills flying out of his hoodie.
Yeah, so that was kind of funny, the shot of the money sort of blowing away, and it was like, nah,
so good. And I love the all the cars that were used, all the cars, all the guns. I mean, it was great. The first car that they used and then buried was like it looked like an IROC Camaro, like a 1986 IROC Camaro or something like that. And then there was this like crappy Saturn that they had. It was great watching the cars like do the work with these guys, and then they drive it into a big dug pit and just bury it and then go have a beer. I mean, it's just like this brilliance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to hit on that one before we hit Green Street Hooligans real quick?
No, I think I've said everything I have to say about that movie. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. Even if you don't watch movies very often, this one is worth your time. If you're a fan of The Big Lebowski, if you're a fan of Jeff Bridges, you're gonna love this film. We get nothing for trying to get you to go watch it, other than just hoping that you enjoy it as much as we did. So thanks for listening to me ramble about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, definitely. If any of y'all use Amazon, I try not to use Amazon much, but I think it's on sale. You can buy it. Right, I just bought it for $4.99. I don't know if it's still on sale, but that is an option. It's probably streaming elsewhere. I don't know, but yeah. So to hit Green Street Hooligans really quickly, basically the premise of this one is, just to hit the plot real quick, then we kind of discuss themes. Is Elijah Wood is a senior at Harvard.
Okay, so you did watch the right film and I did not. I'm looking for the version that I actually watched, and I can't freaking find it. So just scrap everything I've said about this movie. All I can say is there's another version of this, and I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon Prime. Unless I'm a total dum-dum, which sometimes I am. It's called the same thing, and there's a Green Street Hooligans 2, but it's not that, and I can't find it on IMDb. I feel like I watched a movie no one has seen, but it's called the same thing, except it was just all very British, whereas this one, it takes place in London, obviously, but it's got different actors. It's a Hollywood movie. It's got homeboy from Sons of Anarchy and frickin' Frodo Baggins and stuff, and I didn't watch that version, dude. I watched a UK version.
So okay, so it didn't have Elijah Wood or Charlie Hunnam or anybody in it.
No, but it was like the exact same plot. It was like a brother moves back to London because his younger brother had been killed in a football hooligan incident, and he like rejoins the football hooligan club, and they have this whole like fight club thing going on and underground like bets on the fights that they're having, and the gangs all support like, a particular team, your Manchester U and yada yada, all the other soccer football people. And that's why I was like, dude, this movie had subpar acting and like a really bad soundtrack. Like I watched something totally different.
Oh, okay. So oh man, okay. I didn't. Oh, okay. So I see now. Yeah, I know they did like a couple of sequels. I was wondering if maybe because when I first thought maybe you watched the Football Factory, because I think that's
I swear it's called Green
similar.
Street Hooligans, dude. Like even I have to find it. I've been searching for it the entire time we've been talking, and it's like it doesn't exist on IMDb.
Oh, that's weird because I know the Green Street Hooligans I watched the like I mentioned earlier, I have the DVD, but the only place it's streaming is on YouTube. Okay, was it Green Street Hooligans Underground?
Maybe. I
Because
mean,
that
I
one's
don't.
on Prime.
Does it look super British?
Yes, this looks.
Send me a link. Link me somewhere, and
Yeah,
text
this
me
is.
the link to that.
Let
I'll
me
verify.
let me drop this in the private chat. But I feel now reading the description, I feel like this is probably the one that because it seems like basically this a very similar plot.
That's it. That's it, dude. That's the
Okay.
one. That's what I watched. I don't know if you can put that on screen or not. I'll share it on my end actually, and you can
Okay.
see it down there in the backstage. Uh, boom, there it is.
Oh yeah, no, this is I don't this looks not very good. I can
Dude,
understand why you didn't why you
I
didn't
was
enjoy
like, this is
it.
just not great. Like, but it's the exact same plot pretty much, except the guy didn't come from Harvard, I don't think. He was like, I don't know. It was I
Okay,
don't
now
know
I see
what
the
to say.
romance scenes. I see what you're talking because I was like I remember there was like one scene between Elijah Wood's character's sister and her husband, but I was like, I didn't think that was that much of a romance. But now, okay, now we it was two totally different movies. Okay, well, in that
So I'll just say all I can say is I do not recommend Green Street Hooligans Underground. But maybe I should watch the actual one with Elijah Wood in it.
yeah, I'll if it's worth watching. I'll drop the because it's like I said, the only place you can find that one is on either the DVD or on YouTube. Make sure this doesn't play. Hold on. I hope the audio is not going to come through.
This is so funny.
I'll drop this in the private. If you do want to watch it at some point, I think it was pretty good.
Oh,
But
I'm gonna watch it post haste now.
yeah,
this
so
is this is too much. Like I found this thing on Amazon. I was like, oh sweet, it's got a watch now on it. I don't have to like, pay for it. Cool. And I'm like 5 minutes into it, I'm just like, oh my God. Like I have to turn the subtitles on. There's so much like, forgive me if I get this wrong, any of my UK listeners. There's so much like Cockney sounding stuff in there. I'm like, I just can't follow this. I'm like, I get it now.
well, it's just too bad you had to suffer through what looked like it was not a
I,
pretty terrible movie.
I was just like, who recommended this to me? Shit, I did.
Well, yeah. Watch the other one, and maybe we can
Well,
do something
give
with
me the
that in the
rundown. Give me the quick
future.
and dirty on it, man.
Yeah. So basically, uh, Elijah Wood is a journalism student at Harvard. He's like 2 months shy of graduation, and his roommate hides a bunch of cocaine in with Elijah Wood's things, and then somebody tips off the cops or campus police or who or whatever that this guy has coke in the dorm, and so they come raid the dorm room. It turns out it's in
Does he
Elijah
have
Wood's
Grateful Dead
things.
posters on the wall, by the way?
What was that?
Does he have Grateful Dead posters on the wall? He said he was high on cocaine.
No, his roommate's like a total like rich douchebag type of guy. Um, the Grateful Dead poster would have been a nice touch, though.
The dancing bear.
Right? You like the dancing bear tapestry. So yeah, he ends up getting kicked out of Harvard, and so he goes to England. So he tries to call his dad, and like his dad is like, oh, his voicemail is like, I'm off in Kabul at the moment. Um, and so he goes to England where his sister lives. His sister went over there, got married, had a kid, and it's hard to give a synopsis without giving too many spoilers. I don't know if you care about that or not, but
Oh, I don't care.
it one moment.
I don't think anyone watching cares either, because that's what we're all about, right?
Yeah, probably not. If you watch these streams, you're going to get spoilers. But so he goes over to England and ends up, excuse me. So his brother-in-law's brother, it's played by Charlie Hunnam, is like a football hooligan who's a leader of this firm, which for people who don't know is like basically fan clubs for soccer teams, and they often go out and get in fights with other soccer teams.
It's like gang warfare almost, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're basically like gangs that are centered around soccer teams. And so actually it opens the movie. I forgot this. The movie opens with Charlie Hunnam's crew getting in a fight with a rival crew. And it's a pretty bloody, brutal kind of fist. And that's something, I think with a lot of people, like I used to have this idea that it seemed like Europe was like a very civilized kind of place, not like America. And then once
no guns, right? It's got to be polite and
safe. Yeah, like I grew up like my mom is a big Jane Austen fan. So like I grew up watching adaptations like Jane Austen movies and Jane Austen books rather. And I didn't think that I know we're not like in Victorian England or whatever, but there's this idea that it's like a very proper kind of place. But then, once you start reading about the history of like skinheads, not like the racist kind, but and like things with the like football firms as they're called, like these are pretty brutal. You just talk to anybody that's spending time in Glasgow, and it's like, dude, this place is crazy. Or in Dublin or some of these places that get it's pretty serious violence and arguably even more violent because they don't have guns, right? So you could say, I mean, there's like, yes, obviously, shooting people is a violent act, but like smashing somebody's head into a a post at the end of a handrail or something, which they do in the opening scene of the movie. It's like that's pretty gnarly. Like that's
the one I watched also had that vibe where it was just like a lot of head bashing into steel garbage bins and that kind of stuff. And maybe you want to put this on the screen, but Ruckus gave us the answer here. The one I watched, Hooligans Underground, is a direct-to-video sequel, which is part 3. So I did get the vibe, so this is a similar thing. And to me, the interesting thing about it was just the overall topic. This idea that guys get together, like, sort of lower middle class guys or middle class guys, or I don't know, guys from all the classes get together and have a bar that they hang in and just get, shit faced all the time. And then, obsessed, not really about the games and the teams so much, but more about the rivalry between themselves. And this one, I don't know if the one that you watched has this factor, but this one that I watched, there's a Fight Club factor to it where those factions or whatever you call them had these organized like street fights, underground street fights. And, that's what happened with the main character in this one. His brother died in one of those street fights by a rival club gang, whatever. And I was just like, I don't get this. Like, I have a hard time relating to this. Like, I get the brotherhood of like, a subculture, being a metalhead. Like I get that. I understand what it's like to have a group of guys who have a similar passion and like to drink beer. I get that. but I don't get like, you know, going from a group of guys that are into a sport, especially one that, by the way, Jeff Bridges' character Marcus in the movie was watching some soccer, and he said, "I don't understand soccer. It's like a sport that any 5-year-old could play. How is that a sport? Who invented this?" You know, he had this whole rant about it, and I was like, "That's really funny," because we're going to talk about a movie based on soccer. But yeah, the whole like I relate to Sons of Anarchy, right? Because there's the motorcycle gangs. I totally relate to that. Like like that's kind of brotherhood, like being a metalhead or whatever, like times a bazillion or something like that. Those guys. But yeah, over like a sport, I always have a hard time with that. And over a sport that's huge, not in America, is more hard for me to relate to, or difficult for me to relate to. So I don't know. I find the whole thing very interesting, but apparently I watched like the Temu version, not even the Walmart version.
Yeah, I mean, because the original, the first one, there's no like trained kind of. It's just like people street fighting. Like it's not like, because I noticed when you had the Amazon thing pulled up, there was like a sequence looked like he was in a boxing ring or something. Like it was none of that. Like these are just these are guys that yeah, they're just like going out and drinking beer and smoking cigarettes and going to the football matches, and then going and like fighting with rival gangs. And I think that's an interesting thing that I was never a big part of. Like I growing up, I like went to like being into hardcore and going to hardcore shows, and like there was a crew that was around. Like I didn't know any of the guys who were in it. I had we had mutual friends. I just I had other friends, but I'd see them out at shows, and like the scene I grew up in wasn't really violent, but like their hardcore scenes like LA in the 80s, New York in the 80s, Boston in the 90s and 2000s, where people describe Boston in like the late mid 90s to early 2000s as a war zone. Like it was just and that sort of, that's a little bit different kind of thing, but that comes out of when a lot the some of those crews were formed because they were like actual real neo-Nazis who would come to shows, and it was basically like who's going to have your back if something goes down. And that's something I never really got into. So I was never in a group of people where like fighting was a central part. Like my friends and I got in. We like when you're a kid, things happen. You get in plenty of
Yeah,
scraps and
like
scuffles.
we've got our little cliques and stuff, and things go wrong in the pit, and that's all well and good. But like I
Yeah,
remember like being from California and just going to every death metal show I could, and thrash metal show I could possibly get my ass into, like from the time I was 15 to I don't know when, till now. But I remember the first time I saw Agnostic Front with Obituary, and it was just like this weird blending of like two things I'd never seen before. You got all your dudes in mil spec camos and Dr. Martin boots, and then you got these other guys on the other side. There's like this small clique of guys in skinhead and red suspenders and wife beaters and stuff and the high pants and all that, and it was just like, whoa, this was weird. Like this is the kind of thing I hear about happening on the East Coast and places like that, and like there were no fights or anything like that, but you could definitely see like the that weird blending, and I would always hear a lot about that from like the East Coast, because the metal scene and the hardcore scene were very close together, and there were people that crossed through both of them, like Billy Milano and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the difference in that. But like this is another level even from that, I think.
Yeah, this is this was pretty intense, and it just seems like their whole thing is just being fans of the same soccer, whatever football team, and just like fighting other. It's like there's no real rhyme or reason, but that's like an actual culture. Like that's something that really happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that all across Europe, they've really tried, in the UK, they've really cracked down on the football hooliganism, because of, the violence that comes along with it, property destruction, and we see some of that where there is a lot of even, and I mentioned this thing in the Palantir stream, and I didn't see it this time around, so maybe I was mixing it up with a different movie, but I thought there was a scene where it was like showing through a CCTV, and it was showing these different characters who had these like sort of bars over their heads that identified the like their threat level basically. And I thought it was this movie, the Green Street Hooligans, but it may have been something. I may have mixed that up or misremembered or something. But there are scenes where they show through the CCTV cameras, and this movie is I mentioned 9/11 earlier. Is this movie is very much, it's because it came out in 2005, so it's very much a product of the recently post 9/11 era, where you had these where like when Elijah Wood's character lands in London, and they have those kind of loudspeaker announcements about, I don't think they explicitly mentioned terrorism, but things like that, where it's like, oh, be aware of like your bags or whatever at all times. And I think one of the characters, he says something at one point about like, he points to a CCTV camera, and he's like, we're the most surveilled country in the world. And so to get to that point, basically what happens is, so Elijah Wood's brother-in-law's brother, so Elijah Wood's brother-in-law and sister, they have plans, because he gets into town, and then his brother-in-law's like, I'm taking your sister out tonight, we're going to see Chicago. And so they end up talking his brother, the Charlie Hunnam character, into taking Elijah Wood's character out to the football match. And Charlie Hunnam's character doesn't want to take him because he's like, nah, this guy's like he's like a Yankee dork. But they end up taking him, and so they sneak into the match. And so Elijah Wood's character, I can't think of his name, I have to look it up. Matthew was his name. He's going to go back to the house by himself, but ends up getting jumped by a group of rival, like another firm. And so he just within Charlie Hunnam character. What is the Charlie Hunnam character's name? Let me find
Pete.
Pete, that's it. So Pete and his firm, they come out because Matthew like gets to know the crew, because they go to the bar, they go to the pub, I guess, before the match. So one of his friends is kind of, one of Pete's friends is like, doesn't like him. And but so they end up coming out and jumping in and helping him out. And so, and he just sort of kind of gets deeper and deeper in with this firm. So he starts, going to the bar, starts smoking cigarettes and drinking.
Are there Rocky workout montages? Because my movie had Rocky style workout montages that were so atrocious. I fast forwarded so many parts of this Temu version of this movie.
No, this was all just guys like sitting around in the pub, like drinking pints and smoking cigarettes.
There was a bit of that in mine too.
there was no this was just sheer street brutality. So yeah, and so like I say, he gets in deeper with the crew, and then it turns out that this firm was started by this guy they call the Major, and who was this apparently like super violent, hardcore kind of guy. Well, as it turns out, the Major is actually Pete's brother, right? Matthew's brother-in-law. And so what ended up happening is he got into his firm got into which supports West Ham United, got into a fight with a crew that supports Millwall. And this guy who was the leader of the Millwall firm would always take his 12-year-old son to games. His son gets in the fight and ends up mixed up in the fight and ends up getting stomped to death. And so that was like years before. And so that's when what is Pete's brother's name? Let me see if I can find it.
This is how a
Uh,
super villain football hooligan is born.
yeah, for real.
Origin story.
Steve. So Steve is Pete's brother. So he gets out of it. He's like done. He says like, no, I'm getting out of this. And he meets Matthew's sister, and she tells him like, if you ever get involved in any kind of thing like that again, like we're done. That's it. We're over. And so he gets out completely, gets some kind of good job, making a ton of money. I don't think they ever actually say what he does, but he's, wearing pinstripe suits and driving a Land Rover. And so one of the things is like they don't like cops and they don't like journalists. And so Matthew had been a journalism student, and then he ends up getting seen by somebody in the firm because he ends up meeting up with his dad because his dad's a journalist, and he goes to the Times building and ends up meeting somebody, and one of the guys from the firm sees it. So there's this whole thing where they think he's a journalist, especially because they find his laptop and he'd been writing about his experiences, and he tells them like, no, like this is just a journal. I'm not a journalist. I'm not here to, get anybody in trouble or anything. So the guy that didn't like, so many character names trying to keep up. The guy that didn't like Matthew ends up going and informing the guy whose son had gotten killed, who runs who leads the Millwall firm, that they're at this pub. So they end up firebombing the pub because they find out that Steve is there, and so then they end up going to meet up for the two firms, the West Ham United and the Millwall firm, end up meeting up for like this big battle. And so let's see.
This like willingness to do, terroristic violence over soccer. I struggle with this. I have a hard time. I had a hard time with it in the one I was watching. I have an even harder time knowing that like it's actually based on, some form of reality.
Yeah, it is hard to understand, and it seems that there's a good book that's supposed to be good. I haven't read it yet. I bought it. It's called Among the Thugs. It was written back, I don't remember when. But then there's another book too I bought that's sort of about football hooliganism. I think it's Ultras something Modernity. I found them both on Amazon. Modernity book or something like that. So I'm going to dig into those because, Hated and Proud, Ultras Contra Modernity. I think that one's about an Italian firm, but it seems like it's sort of it's like that sort of the football or soccer or whatever is kind of secondary to all of this. It's more about that's just sort of the vehicle for that, and that's just something. I think they are genuinely fans, but it's more about having this brotherhood of where you have each other's backs, you're all fighting alongside each other. Because at one point when they were about to get in a fight earlier in the film, and Matthew, the Elijah Wood character, is like, "No, we got to get out of here." And Charlie Hunnam's like, "No." He's like, "You never run."
Yeah,
it's that idea of you never back down, never run. Whatever happens is, it's what happens. And
I think that's what I need to like get through my head is what you just said. It's not so much about the soccer. Like, yes, that is a thing, but if you look at, Bloods and Crips, you could say, is it about music? Like, what is it? It could be just as odd and questionable to some people. But yeah, it's that like that need to have that outlaw brotherhood and make it be the priority in one's life. And it's the same with motorcycle clubs or whatever. Like, so I guess the outlawism is, a good theme tonight for both these movies, even though I watched the Temu version of the one you're talking about. But it's like, it's gang mentality, right? It's outlaw gang mentality, and it doesn't really necessarily matter what the vehicle is, whether it's, Harleys and Indians, or whether it's Manchester United, or whether it's Robin Hood style, us against the banksters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's yeah, I think it's kind of a tale. It's like an old tale of like who's at the top of the proverbial food chain, right? Is that these people are basically the firms seem to be basically competing to see, who is the dominant force on the streets, like who's the toughest, who's the most violent, like who is, willing to, no matter what the odds are, like if you're way outnumbered, if it's like 8 against 20, like it doesn't matter,
Yeah, and
you're
it's like
still.
prison rules creep into it because a lot of these people are ex-cons.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, it seems to be a societal kind of thing, because you see there's a scene where they're waiting to hear, there's some kind of tournament or something where they're waiting to hear what the matchups are going to be, and all the guys are like at their jobs, and they're focused in, like they're watching on TV what's happening, and you see and it's interesting because they're all from like different walks of life. So you have a guy who's at a mechanic, like a car mechanic shop. You have a guy who's working for a web design company, like the Charlie Hunnam character is he's works at I don't know what they call it in the UK. I think it's like primary school, like an elementary school, where or middle school, whatever it is, where he teaches history and PE, but he basically just plays soccer every day for PE, and so
Which is that Fight Club vibe, right?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, good. It's a good call out. Yeah, and so it's people who are, they're in different, come from different walks of life and in different backgrounds and different, socio-economic levels, but at the same time, you get the idea that London is a pretty dangerous place, I think, especially now. And something I was just thinking about. I was listening to a segment. I was listening to an episode of GB News, which that's one of my main go-tos for news, even though it's pretty much all UK news. But I like to. I was listening to that, and I was listening to a segment from Nigel Farage's show. He had somebody else guest hosting the other night, but they had on this guy who was like a retired cop or detective or something from Scotland Yard, and he was talking about how the CCTV, like they have CCTV everywhere in London, because they're talking about crime in London. And same thing, like in the movie where they point out, like, and there's even scenes where like you're sort of seeing through the CCTV cameras. But this guy, and I was thinking about this stuck out to me because I know we're going to be talking about this, and also, thinking about like the surveillance state, like we talked about with the Palantir, is that one of the interesting things that the point this guy made was that it's like, why aren't they using the CCTV to crack down on crime? So I was like, that's a kind of interesting thing. He said basically the cops just weren't using it. And it was all about, like he said, I think it was only within the last 10 years they'd used it for pattern recognition, in terms of like seeing somebody, wearing a certain tie, and then they catch that person wearing it later or whatever. And it's not really used by the cops very much, apparently, which I thought was very interesting. If you have that sort of surveillance technology at your fingertips, literally, and they're not taking advantage of it.
Makes you think that, like, what's the actual value of it, right? I'm glad you put Jason's comment up. I was about to bring that up. But to your comment, it makes you wonder, well, if you're not going to, you tell us, you tell the plebs that you're going to use it to keep them safe, but are you really using it to just collect big data, so that you can selectively use that footage and the other portions of big data against specific people? Like, that's not good if that's really what's going on. Like, they say you are the product a lot. Maybe you are. Maybe this is, if it's not being used in the way that they tell us it's being used, you got to say, well, what's the second option, and why are they lying about the way that it's being used? And I think we got that going on in the United States too. We were told here in the United States that the UK had the biggest surveillance program on the planet, 15 years ago. But I think now I don't go anywhere where I don't see cameras everywhere.
Yep.
You can't do anything in a suburb. Everyone has a Ring camera. Every stoplight has a camera on it. Like, and there's no reason for it to be there other than surveillance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can put Jason's comment. I think you wanted to make a comment about what Jason had said.
Yeah.
Which, oh, go ahead.
No, just I liked that comment, and I think it speaks to what we were talking about. It doesn't really matter what the vehicle is. It's just someone gets involved in a club or anything like that, and it ends up having like a criminal gang aspect to it. Let's just be frank. He says there's, for the audio only listeners, there's an implicit mutual blackmail type of bond because it only takes one member to betray and they're all screwed. And they all know that's the kind of thing that ends them up in prison. And we're talking about, some of these people being ex-cons. Like, prison rules are already in effect for new people that matriculate in. So, it's like, again, it doesn't really matter what the as you said, the vehicle is. It's that is an implicit fact about, being involved in something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why there was such a big thing about like they don't talk to cops and they don't talk to journalists because if something gets in the press, then that can draw police attention, and it on a more basic, it's like it's a breach of trust. If you all have this thing where you're all kind of in there together, I mean that's why it's a huge deal, from what I understand, in a lot of these, whatever kind of activities people are getting up to that may not be legal. Is it's like when you're in, I mean, some people they do end up ratting out their comrades, and that is generally not looked down upon. And that, if you watch Gangland, which I've seen every episode multiple times. I mean, that show, it's like if you go out there and talk, I mean, there are people who get killed for that. Like that's not that's not uncommon. Oh, you're on mute again.
Sorry. The ones that talk are the ones that haven't been to prison yet in a lot of those cases, and they will eventually go there. And then, they haven't been to con college yet. Put it that way.
Yeah, it's just a very good point. Kristen makes an interesting point in the chat. It says big data will one day be just like the billions of files in East Germany, a useless waste.
I hope so.
I hope so. And I think there may be something to that, because there is so much data. It's like, how can you possibly ever sift through this?
Look, it already has been a giant waste bin. All right. Like they're having to digitally like search the giant waste bin to target certain people for political things, and other narratives and shit like that. Right. But the AI is their solution to that. So we got to keep that in mind. Like, they think that what they're going to do with AI is going to make their like enable them to use that dustbin, that Indiana Jones, archive of data into something usable. So, that references what we were talking about last time in the Palantir stream. That Palantir software combined with its AI capabilities is what they think is going to give them a three-dimensional view of all of our lives. And if they're willing to film everything that's going on and not use it to solve crimes, you got to wonder, is that what this is all about? So, thus the fight of freedom versus technocracy.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So I'm going to drop the link. I know I put it in the private chat. If anybody wants to watch, Green Street Hooligans, the first one, I'm going to drop the link in the chat, and I'll put it.
Watch the first one, folks. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, definitely. That one's. I'm
a terrible guest. I apologize, man. But
no, you're good. I thought about it. I just thought, I was like, I probably should have just sent, because it was on YouTube. I should have just sent the link of.
Next time we'll be like, here's what I'm watching, dumbass. What are you watching?
uh, but yes, if people want to watch it, it's streaming on YouTube, or it's playing on YouTube for free. So I'll put that in the description as well. But yeah, I mean that was pretty much it on that one. I mean, there's more to the plot than that, and I think the bonds. What I was getting at was some of the. I just cap this off with some of the themes, like we saw with uh, Hell
Hell
or
or
High
High Water.
Water. Yeah, we spent 2 hours talking about it. I was like, what? I'm blanking out on the name. With Hell or High Water is the themes of loyalty and particularly loyalty between family and what people are willing, the lengths that people are willing to go to, and major spoiler alert, but basically at the end of the movie, as Matthew, the Elijah Wood character, is getting away, and the guy who got his son killed from the leader of the rival firm is going after him, and so the Charlie Hunnam character, is antagonizing him, like yelling at him as he's walking away. And he's kind of like, whatever, like, I don't care about you. Like, my friends will take care of you. But then he says, he's like, well, like, it wasn't our firm's fault that your son got killed. Like, it was your fault. Like, you should have protected him. You shouldn't have had him there. And so he knows he knows he's going to come back and kill him, which he ends up doing. And so, Pete ends up getting beaten to death. And it's so he sacrifices himself so that Matthew and his sister can get away safely, and so because she comes in a car to pick him up from where they're fighting. So yeah, that's sort of like sacrificial. Even though he and Pete aren't related by blood, I mean he's still you could say in a roundabout way, like they are like family of sorts, and so there's that aspect of which I think is you could say a virtuous kind of thing. I mean it's like I'm terrible about remembering exact references, but like it says in the Bible that no greater love, what is it? No greater love a man has than this, which is to lay his life down for his friends. That's kind of like the ultimate sacrifice and love that you can have for somebody is sacrificing your own life for somebody else. So, and then Elijah Wood at the end, he ends up going back and tracking down the guy who got him expelled from Harvard, and gets him on recording saying that he, like, what he had done. And so he was like, yeah, this is my ticket back into Harvard. And so I think it was the thumbnail I did for this one is the sort of the final scene of where he's walking down the street in, I don't know, Cambridge or Boston, wherever they are, kind of clapping, doing the chant and the clap for the song that the football firm that he had been a part of, that was like whatever, I guess they have whole songs. There's like a whole culture around that. But anyway, so yeah, and that's why I was thinking that some of the ways that the films kind of pair well together is this sort of acts of displays of virtue and loyalty that people have even among kind of violent criminal underworlds.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to watch this one. It's gonna be much better, I can tell already. So yeah, it's interesting. We really kind of came to these two films for this analysis on accident.
Yeah.
And then I had an accident executing it. So to me, it's all very, I don't know, there's a weird synchronicity to how this all played out. And I walked away with something new to watch still too. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad you had me here tonight. And next time I'll double check that I have the right fucking movie to watch. I mean, this is fun. I've never had this happen before, but yeah, man, appreciate you having me on the channel. And it looks like almost everybody hit the like button. Maybe 3 or 4 of you didn't. Please do make sure you're noted as one of the live listeners with a like button. And you can find me at alternatecurrentradio.com. and in the boiler room. But just go to the website for all things alternate current radio.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, folks, check out Alternate Current Radio. A lot of great shows and episodes going on over there. So yeah, go check that out. And yeah, so looking for we'll do some more in the future. And yeah, like you said, make sure we get the right movie. So we had a decent crowd. It was okay for a Friday night. I know a lot of people are out doing things and
see a bunch of our friends in there. That's awesome. I tell you what, man. We're having a special screening of Reanimator here in Texas real soon. And I don't know if you're a fan of that movie like I am, but that might be a fun one to throw in there. We should do a horror movie at some point.
Yeah, I've actually never seen Reanimator, so I'll watch that. And
okay, fresh eyes on it. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
interested to hear how it slaps to someone with fresh eyes in 2025.
Yes, that's I never got really deep into there's certain horror movies I like, but yeah, I never got super deep into it, but I've been wanting to dig into more. So yeah, I'll watch Reanimator, and yeah, we'll regroup for that one. Other than that, I have I'm not going to say what we're doing, but I have a movie stream coming up with Baselit Analyzer. We're doing a trilogy. So, folks, you can make your guesses in the comments if you feel so inclined. So we got a trilogy we're going to hit, and then Jethro and I know I keep saying it, we are going to do it, I promise. We've got the McVeigh stream coming up, and I'm still going to do the American Psycho stream. I forgot about doing that one, but I'll come back and do that one, and then Reanimator. So y'all have that one to look forward to as well. But yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out in the chat. Thanks again, Hesher. And yeah, we'll call it here. But thanks everybody. Have a good night.